Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I was 13 years old. My sister was 12. We were standing outside TJ Maxx clothing store in Older Street in Portland, eyeing the tall willowy mannequin, wearing the blonde wig, sporting a tight-fitting glittering silver dress that sparkled like a twinkling diamond, the pièce de résistance in the evening section of women's clothing. I was dreaming about owning this zooty dress, more than anything else in the entire world. It would seem that for some incongruous, unfathomable reason, it had a curious hold on me that occupied my attention and focus during every waking moment. Of course, I knew in my gut that this was something that my mother would never buy for me in a million years. Hell would freeze over long before she bought me a tight-fitting silver dress like this. I knew it was never going to happen. Nevertheless, I pointed out the silver dress to her in the shop, hope clinging tightly to my heart like a muscle to a rock that doggedly refuses to loosen its hold, as I prayed silently to myself, "Oh God, please, please may she buy this for me." I tried frantically to negotiate with our Heavenly Father, desperately persuading him about all the relevant reasons why it was in the good Lord's best interests that I should actually own this dress. It would look pretty on me. It would make me very happy indeed. But God was not listening to my fanciful desire to own a silver dress. I imagine it wasn't really high on his lists of priorities, but you can't blame a girl for trying, and try I most certainly did, as no territory was left uncharted in pursuing every avenue where I might procure the silvery dress. If I allowed myself to dream, the impossible was almost certainly possible. I had read all about it in books, even the Bible. If you just visualized long and hard enough, and you saw yourself wearing the dress, then it would almost certainly manifest in your reality. My mother straightens the skirt that covers her rotund figure, that over the years has thickened considerably. Wherever she goes, she's noticed, not because she draws crowds by her ravishing beauty, as beautiful my mother is certainly not, but she looks like she stepped out of a Jane Austen novel and morphed into our reality. But I don't mean that in a flattering, complimentary way. My mother looks like a prim, rather austere, draconian, no-nonsense governess, who wears drab brown colours in tweeds and very formal quality fabrics from another era in our history. My mother makes all her own clothes personally, and many of our own dresses. She thinks the vintage, bygone fashions of the 20th century are very unbecoming, immodest and unladylike. Regretfully, she seems to think we should wear her dowdy, frumpish creations when we return home from school every day. They bear a remarkable resemblance to the smocks you see the youngsters wearing in Little House on the Prairie. My father has spoken to my mother on numerous occasions over this sensitive issue concerning the clothes we wear, suggesting as tactfully and diplomatically as he possibly can that perhaps the traditional old-school dresses she makes for us are way too outdated for this modern generation. My mother is clearly locked in some kind of ultra-conservative, retrograde time warp in history, where she feels women dressed far more respectably, in a much more flattering way than they do now, with an elegant grace that is lacking in today's contemporary fashion designs. Thank God we're allowed to wear jeans and sweatshirts on occasions, thanks to my father's persuasive influences on my more than reluctant mother. As he firmly believes, it would be heartily foolish for us to wear her vintage dresses when roughing it or riding our bikes down the streets, which she agrees is reasonable. Unbeknown to her, we wear our jeans as often as we possibly can. As young girls, we like to fit in and not draw uncomfortable attention to ourselves. I point to the cutting-edge, superbly stylish silver dress sported by this mannequin that I would really like to wear to Tonia's party next weekend. I tell this to my mother, crossing my fingers behind my back. "Please, Mum, will you buy it for me?" My mother looks appalled, almost wincing with horror, as she unwillingly eyes the avant-garde silver dress, in a contemptuous revulsion, her thick fingers fingering the flimsy fabric in mock disgust. "They call this a dress?" she chides churlishly. "This looks like something a pocket-sized doll would wear. What a skimpy-looking thing! It leaves nothing to the imagination. The material is fine. The silver is so bright it's almost blinding. Mum, don't you see? Me and Evangeline, we stick out like sore thumbs everywhere we go. We wear such old-fashioned clothes. We dress differently to everyone at school. It's so embarrassing." "So this is what this is all about, is it? You want to look as nondescript as all your friends. Do you realise how dreadful they actually look? If you were to go back to the 1800s with those well-dressed debonair men and women, and they were to glimpse into our time, observe how we're dressing now in our generation, I'm quite sure they'd be more than a little affronted by our casual disregard and uninhibited carefree way we dress these days." "But we're not living in the 1800s, Mum. I wish you would realise that, instead of making me and Evangeline look as if we're about to appear on the next stage set of Little House on the Prairie. All we need is a bucket and pail and a bonnet on our heads, and we might as well be starring with Laura Ingalls Wilder." "Now that's a dig a little bit below the belt, dear. Now I really stuck my neck out buying you those modern Levi jeans and sweatshirts just to appease your father, did I not? But that is where I draw the line. I'll never be seen buying an inappropriate skimpy dress for the likes of you. Over my dead body will I do such a thing." My sister and I exchange furtive, sorrowful looks, dappled with resignation. My sister clandestinely raises her brow and mouths the words, "I told you." We know that any rational, sensible reasoning with my mother will almost certainly fall on deaf ears. If we seek my father for support over a flimsy silver dress, it's not going to cut much weight with him either. We know my father will naturally side with my mother on this one. My dad is not old-fashioned like my mother. Even the suits he wears to work are very tailored and smart, but with a modern-day influence to them. Yet a daughter of his wearing a tight-fitting silver dress like this will never wash with him. My father would definitely consider this dress infelicious, injudicious for a young girl to be wearing. I was once told by someone that before we're born, we choose our parents. Are you kidding me? If I chose both my parents before I entered my mother's womb, I certainly was high on drugs or something, or I was viewing them from an alternative reality, as both my parents are not exactly the ideal choice for the in-the-moment 20th century kids who would like to look like they actually belong to this generation rather than morphed into our reality from the 1800s, which is why I so often feel like a fish out of water, struggling to find a watering hole where I actually belong. Don't get me wrong, I do love my parents. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, isn't it? Love your parents. But me and my sister have a very distant, buttoned-up relationship with our parents, compared to other kids our own age have with their parents. How do I know this? Simple, really. I've seen how other children interact with their parents. They're never afraid to say the first thing that comes out of their mouths, sometimes even letting loose the odd cursory word. God forbid if me or Evangeline ever did that. We would almost certainly be stewing in hot water, rather like a tea bag infusing its soulful flavours in a pot of piping hot tea. I do envy my friends' freedom to be themselves, to wear their hearts on their sleeves without recriminations. In my reserved, repressive, starched, prim and proper household, we mind our P's and Q's all the time like a hawk. We usually never speak until we're spoken to, as my parents always abide by the age-old philosophy that children should be seen and not heard. Yes, my stiff-necked parents are straight-laced, I admit, and they're detached towards us emotionally, but it's not personal. It's just the way they were raised. I guess they're following the same aloof, rather stuffy protocol in raising us. But I do not doubt for a single moment that beneath the formal facade, they love us very much indeed. Me and my sister Evangeline never take it personally, as a teacher in 2nd grade so sagaciously pointed out to me that people can be idiosyncratic. At the time I didn't know what that enigmatic word actually meant, but she explained to me that we are all uniquely different, and that my parents were unusually quirky, eccentric and strict, and she believed that that was what they believed was the right way to raise their own children, so I should not be offended by that, as they knew not how to behave any differently. Our parents' apathetic indifference to us meant for the two of us we didn't have much of an emotional bond with them, as any social interaction was usually detached, highbrow and very structured. They also believed in punishing us if we misbehaved, which usually meant being told to go to bed without dinner. Me and my sisters hated disappointing our parents. They would never shout or scream at us, as they were far too dignified to lower themselves to recruiting uncouth, offensive language to express their grievous indignation towards us. It would seem their chagrined faces would register so much dejection, almost as if we'd let them down so very much that we might as well have slammed them over the heads with a pitchfork. It was almost like watching two animals in distress physically suffering on our accounts. So it wasn't easy on the eyes. Upsetting our parents became something that we were less inclined to do. Our very ornate family house was located in Portland. It was a quintessential Queen Victoria type home that was very common in the 1800s, with Gothic influences and detailed woodwork, all pristinely painted in white enamel emulsion. Our house had pitched roofs, a wraparound front porch, turrets and roof towers. It was painted in pale pink, with white ornate edging and black roofs. It has a fairy tale castle-like appearance to it that I've always loved. One night when the grandfather clock in our hallway strikes midnight, I creep into my sister's bedroom, poking her in the chest, but she groans, rolls over on her side, and buries her head in the pillow. "Go to bed, sis. I'm trying to sleep." I'm not easily discouraged, so I poke my sister again. "Wake up, Evangeline. I've just had a marvellous idea regarding the silver dress." I'm looking at her with wide eyes, enthusiasm charging through my mind like a NASA space rocket. I have a sense the silver dress is on the very threshold of belonging to me, and I've never wanted anything so badly. It's an all-consuming hold over me that I simply cannot shake off. I can already see my girlfriends' admiring looks as they see me wearing this amazing dress to Tonya's party next weekend. I'm almost certain I'm going to provoke the green-eyed monster among many of them. But then again, that's the whole idea, isn't it? To stand out from the rest of the crowd. And at Tonya's party, every eye will be on the girl, shining as brightly as the Star of David. My sister sits bolt upright in bed. Her face looks exasperated. I suppose I can't blame her, really, when I've woken her up at this ungodly hour. But she has no comprehension what it's like to want something this badly. So badly, in fact, that it tears you up inside. "Can't you forget about the silver dress, Emma? I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to accept that Tonya's party is next weekend. We don't have the money to buy the dress for you. Some things are not meant to be. I know it's hard, sis, and I get that you love the dress, but just let it go, will you?" "But I love the dress, Evangeline. It's the most beautiful dress in the whole world. I've never wanted anything more in my whole life." "Aren't you being dramatic, Emma? Granted, the dress is very nice, I know, but it's not that irresistible. There are nicer things in this world than that silver dress, which you keep putting on a pedestal like some kind of demigod. I'm sorry, but you're ridiculous. This whole thing is ridiculous, and your obsession with the dress is ridiculous. Aren't you listening? We can steal the dress from the apartment store. It can't be that hard to pinch, surely, I say. My sister looks at me as if she hasn't heard me right. What did you say? I said we can steal the dress from the store. Other people have shoplifted in the past and gotten away with it. Why shouldn't we be successful if we're very clever? Are you kidding me, Emma? We can't get away with stealing a dress. You know those shops. They have hidden cameras everywhere, watching your every move. What if we get caught? Besides, it's morally wrong. You know it is. If Mum and Dad found out we had done such a dreadful thing, it would break their hearts almost certainly. They'd be so ashamed of us. They'd blame themselves for not raising us right. Do you want to put them through that emotional turmoil and self-recrimination? No, it's not fair on them. You know how awful we feel when we upset them. They take everything so very personally. Aside from that, stealing is wrong. You know it is. Evangeline, you don't get it. I don't care if stealing is wrong. Don't care at all. Not right at this moment, anyway. I'd rather not think about the moral implications if you don't mind. I could do without the guilty conviction. Don't you get it? I have to have that dress, and you're going to help me steal it tomorrow. And my decision about this is final, and that is that. Remember, you owe me. I gave you that toffee apple. You promised me that you would make it up to me. I'm holding you to that promise. But sis, how are we going to steal it without being caught? You're going to block me, aren't you? When I surreptitiously slip the silver dress into my bag by lifting another dress above me, as if you're examining the hem, so that the camera doesn't pick up my slipping the dress into the bag. It's going to be straightforward. Emma, I don't know if I can do this. There are people manning those cameras all the time, looking out for suspicious behaviour and guilty-looking body language. I know I'll look guilty as hell. You know I can't even lie with a straight face. They'll take one look at me on the security footage and scream, "Shoplifter! Shoplifter! Shoplifter!" They'll know at once that I'm up to no good. Besides, even our drama teacher, Mrs. Bostick, says my acting skills leave much to be desired. Well, you're just going to have to step up your acting skills then, aren't you? You're going to have to look nonchalant. I'm relying on you to help me, and I don't want you to do anything that's going to look remotely suspicious or questionable. We're wearing jeans and sweatshirts tomorrow, along with sensible flat sneakers. We need to blend in with the crowd. We're going to act like two excited youngsters looking through tons of clothes together. And so it was. Me and my sister take a bus trip downtown, sneaking outside the kitchen door of our Victorian home, when my mother falsely assumes we're seated at our worn-out writing desks in our bedrooms, studiously doing our homework, which is far from the truth. The kitchen door is always left open, so slipping out is seamless. Ostensibly, provided we are quick about it, we can sneak back home stealthily and slip back in the house by way of the back kitchen door, without my mother's feathers becoming remotely ruffled. She won't even know we've been gone. Luckily, the bus drops us off on the side of the main asphalt road, directly opposite the clothing store. We get off the bus and cross the road. We have had about as much experience in shoplifting as a goldfish has swimming on dry land. This is not going to be funny, not at all. I don't mind admitting that I'm nervous as hell, but thoughts of owning that silver dress propel me ever forward with an audacious, intrepid determination that is quite literally grabbing me by the hand and thrusting me across the floor of the shop, one foot after another. It seems like an impertinent courage is making her acquaintance known with me. But have I really got the guts to go through with this outrageous stunt? You have to do it, a voice whispers in my mind. You've come this far. No backtracking now. My sister is walking close beside me. I can see by her fidgety, panicky appearance she's looking very ill at ease. At one point she's actually squeezing her eyes tightly shut, as if willing this whole nightmare to go away. I notice her hand that is normally loosely hanging at her side is tightly clenched, so much so that I can actually see the white knuckles showing. It's my fault I've embroiled her in this nefarious scheme, but I've just got to have that silver dress. It's teasing and taunting me. Suffice to say, the idea of rocking up to Tonia's party next weekend without wearing that silver dress is not something I can possibly envisage. I've already seen the looks of wondrous awe as every eye at that party is pinned on me. I can hear the faint whispers among my friends. Oh my God, I feel so dowdy next to her. She looks like she could be walking down the red carpet in Hollywood. Look at Emma, she's a goddess. All these images are whispered in my mind as I smile inwardly. Even I'm not certain why the silver dress has such a gripping hold on me. But I don't care. I've just got to have it. And it's as simple as that. Some things in life are just meant to be. And this is one of those things. I've never been so nervous in my entire life. I don't think I could make a life out of crime. I just haven't got the stomach for it. Things that involve breaking the law are not that becoming to me. There's an entire colony of butterflies flapping around precariously in my guts that I willfully try to ignore. You hear of those bored housewives with a plethora of money and about as much common sense as a pigeon, grabbing crumbs off the ground, only yards away from the very conspicuous household tomcat. These women, I've been told, get a frenzied buzz from shoplifting. You've got to be kidding me. There's nothing enjoyable about this. My heart is thumping so loudly. If I'm not careful, it might just come bounding out of my chest like a rogue tennis ball that's lost its way. I'm sure I'm acting suspicious. I know these security guards look out for dubious, highly questionable body language. Every part of me is trembling like a jelly. It's like I'm certain there's a red flag on my face saying, "Look at her! She's about to steal from your store." I do feel racked with guilt. I can't lie about that. My conscience is definitely prickling me. "It's wrong. Don't do it. Don't do it." I hear a whispering voice in my gut that only moments before was literally encouraging me. Me and my sisters are both carrying large handbags. We pretend to browse through the different clothes we see together, as if discussing what we like, and then I move towards the silver dresses, surreptitiously. To my horror, they all have alarm devices attached to their hems, which have to be removed by the cashier at the register. My heart sinks. This is just my luck. This is all I need. You'd think I'd have the common sense to say that the universe has conspired against me, firmly deciding that I cannot have this dress. But would I listen to its reverent, sagacious warnings and wise instruction? Absolutely not. My sister whispers in my ear, "Let's go." Her expression is flooded with relief. "We can't get the silver dress you want. It's got a lock on it. If we take it out of the store, the alarm will ring and we will get caught." I have another idea, I tell her, marching confidently with the silver dress in my hand towards the cash register. The woman behind the cashier desk smiles at me warmly. "Beautiful dress," she says, disconnecting the security tag from the dress and folding it up neatly. "Is it cash or card?" "It's card," I say. The woman rings up my dress, while I frantically appear to look for my card in my bag, knowing full well that I don't even own a card. But my charade is convincing. "I don't know where I put my card. I thought it was in my purse." I proceed to empty out the contents of the large bag on the counter. Lipsticks, diaries, cough lozenges, tissues and hairbrushes land on the cash desk in a large mountain of chaos, while I surf through it like a dumpster diver looking for a lost treasure. "Take your time," says the woman behind the till. "It happens sometimes," she says sympathetically. "It's easy to misplace a credit card." "Oh, I think I left the card at home," I say to her, grabbing the dress from her quickly. "I'll go and hang the silver dress back up for you, where I found it. I'll go home and get my card." "I can keep your dress for you here safely until you return." "No, you better not," I say. "You don't know how long I'm going to be, do you?" The customer queuing behind me is getting exceedingly annoyed. She's been impatiently waiting for a long while to pay for her garments. So the shop assistant behind the cash register shrugs her shoulders in a nonchalant resignation as she begins to deal with her next customer, who is less than agreeable. She's complaining bitterly to the shop assistant for having to wait for so long. I victoriously go and hang the silver dress up, minus its security attachment, in a secret location. Then me and my sister exit the shop for a brief moment, returning again within 10 minutes, champing at the bit to get this whole thing over and done with. We rarely need to get back home before my mother realizes we're not at our desks doing our homework. We're looking through the silver dresses. I grab the one that I had surreptitiously tucked in the far corner. I whisper, "Now!" My sister stands in front of me, holding up another dress, assiduously pretending to examine the price tag. I'm not sure what we look like behind a security camera. I hope we look convincing. I quickly shove the silver dress in my bag, and then we hurriedly move away from the dress rail, walking towards the exit, trying to look very composed. But I'm sure I look anything but. My heart is thumping, but I keep my head fixed on the open door. Then we see him. A security officer looks at us with a solemn expression on his face. "Will you two ladies come with me?" he says gingerly. In that moment, I wish the ground would swallow me whole, as the security officer leads us up some stairs into a private office. My heart is now literally thundering at 1,000 miles an hour through my chest. My fingers are shaking. We've been caught red-handed. Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. "What's this about, officer?" I ask. "Would you young ladies kindly open your bags for me?" The security officer pulls out the silver dress from my bag. "May I see your receipt for this silver dress?" he asks me. My face flushes bright red. My words seem to have frozen like ice at the back of my throat. My mind is looking for answers, but I find none. I stand there like a lemon, not knowing exactly what to say, for no words are generously forthcoming. Finally, my sister says, "Emma was going to buy that dress. I don't know how it ended up in her bag. She was intending to put it back on the rail. It must have accidentally slipped into her bag, I think." The security officer is an overweight man, with a stomach so large it hangs over his belt. He smirks at us. "If I had $1 for every time someone said that to me, I would be a very wealthy man indeed." The security officer is speaking on a crackling radio to someone in authority. "Young girl stolen a silver dress from women's evening wear. Yes, they're here. Yes." Oh my God, he's calling the police. Are we going to have a police record? Please God, no. Oh my word, what have I done? "Please sit down," says the security officer. "Over there," he says, gesturing to the 2 chairs on the opposite side of the desk. "Mr. Carter-Jones will be with you in a moment." My sister and I say nothing to each other. We sit on uncomfortable hard-backed metal chairs next to each other, staring vacantly at the pedestrian-looking beige walls of this nondescript office, where there is an old calendar of dogs on the wall that looks as if it's 3 years out of date, along with an ominous sign in blazing red print that screams loudly, "Thieves will be prosecuted." In the far corner of the room is a metal filing cabinet, and the desk we're sitting at is wooden with pitted marks in it. I see someone has carved the words in the desk. I didn't mean it. I imagine some youngster like me carved those words in the wood, after having stolen something that did not belong to them. It seems oddly comforting that my experience has been shared with others. A tall man of about 6'5", very slender with a neat moustache and a receding hairline, takes a seat opposite us on a blue and white upholstered chair. He's quite debonair, really, wearing a skinny purple tie that matches his purple-framed glasses. He's staring at us through his brown, piercing eyes. "What's your name?" he asks me, his eyes fixing on me sternly, his voice sharp and crisp. I tremble. "Emma, sir." "Emma, do you realise how serious it is to be caught shoplifting?" I nod. "I'm sorry, sir. I won't do it again, I promise you. I've never stolen a thing in my life. You can ask my sister. I just wanted that silver dress, and I couldn't afford it. I'm really sorry, sir." "Sir, it's true," says Evangeline. "We know stealing is wrong, sir. We do." The tears pour down her cheeks. "My sister wanted that dress, sir. We couldn't afford to buy it. Please don't call the police. Please, I beg you, don't call them. My mother will be so upset. The man's face softens. I'll let you girls off this time, he says. But I do need to speak to your parents about this. What is your mother's surname and her phone number? Oh, please, sir. Please don't speak to my mother. She'll be so disappointed in us. She'll be so upset. That's not my problem, young lady. What is your mother's telephone number? I give it to him with a heavy reluctance as the officer taps our number in his cell phone, putting it on speakerphone so we can hear my mother's reaction when he delivers the cruel blow to her and informs her that she's raised 2 criminal scoundrels for daughters. The officer does not appreciate that my mother is not going to take the news at all well. This could actually destroy her. My mother's cell phone rings, and me and my sister hold our breaths as if we're diving under the water. My mother answers the phone. Hello? Hello? Is this Mrs. Falconer speaking? That's right. Who's this? Comes my mother's voice. This is Officer Carter Jones speaking, madam. I have your 2 daughters here with me, Emma and Evangeline. They've both been caught shoplifting in our store. Your daughter Emma has stolen a silver dress from evening wear. You must be mistaken, comes my mother's voice, weak with horror. My 2 children are in their bedrooms doing their homework. Sorry, madam. They're here with me. A silver dress, you say, says my mother. Is it sleeveless? Is it short? That's right, madam. There's a stiff, awkward silence at the end of the telephone. I know my mother is remembering the silver dress I asked her to buy me. You're not going to prosecute, are you, sir? Comes my mother's strained voice. I'll have stiff words with them, Mr. Carter Jones, I assure you. They'll never do this again. I'll make absolutely sure of it. On this occasion, madam, we will not refer this case to the police. But the next time they do this, they will be immediately arrested. We're letting them off with a warning. Thank you so much, Mr. Carter Jones, comes my mother's relieved voice. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your leniency, Mr. Carter Jones. I assure you, officer, I've brought my children up to respect other people's belongings. Me and my husband are very strict parents. We teach our children right from wrong. I don't know what possessed them to do this outrageous thing. It is most unlike them. I know Emma was pressing me to buy that silver dress for her, but I point-blank refused. And this must be their way of getting back at me. Could you send my children home at once, sir? Tell them to get the bus back now. I'll deal with them as soon as they get back. Mr. Carter Jones, what is your favourite tipple, sir? I enjoy Scottish whisky, madam. In fact, I enjoy it very much. I'll send you a very expensive bottle, Mr. Carter Jones. My way of thanking you for your discretion. That will be very much appreciated, madam. The officer looks exceedingly pleased. I think he rather likes the idea of receiving an expensive bottle of Scottish whisky for his trouble. You 2 children may leave now, he says, waving his arms at us, as if he's had about as much of us as he can possibly take. You heard your mother. She wants you back home. You need to get that bus now. I should be relieved that me and my sister are not being retained by the police, but picturing my crestfallen, disenchanted parents, the injurious hurt we've caused them when they realise what we've done, quite literally jerks at my heartstrings. The idea of returning home is about as attractive as sleeping with a scorpion right now. Delaying the inevitable seems a lot more preferable, as embracing procrastination as our steadfast ally seems not half such a bad idea. As me and my sister scramble on the bus, I tell her we can't go home to face my mother's wrath and her chagrin disappointment. I can't face it, I explain to her. I need this like a hole in my head. Well, where are we going to go, Emma, then? We're going to get off this bus and take number 33 to the countryside, and we're going to get off near the woodgrove. My sister nods. I explain my new ingenious plan to her. I assured her that our parents would be so worried about us not returning home that their anger about stealing the silver dress would subside and wilt away like a dying flower in the meadow, to be remembered no more. If they think we've gone missing, they'll be so worried about us that the fact we've disappeared will override their concerns about what we've actually done. Then we'll be in a lot less trouble. You know what they did the last time they were mad with us? We went to bed without dinner, and they confiscated our cell phones for a whole month. That was the longest month of our lives. Do you want that to happen again?" My sister shakes her head. I like that about Evangeline. I'm quick to talk her around anything, as my sister is a Libra and is so indecisive about everything, so she's always relied on me to make all the decisions for the both of us, even when she's had her misgivings and doubts, like she does now, as I can see her forehead is furrowed. "Don't you see, Evangeline? If they think we've gone missing, they'll never ever take our cell phones away from us. They'll realise we need our cell phones if they want to contact us. Right now, our cell phones are at home being charged. They can't even contact us. They won't want us to be without them, will they? I'll say to them when I see them, 'If I'd had my cell phone, Dad, then I would have been able to phone you, and you would have been able to pick us up. You want us to sleep the night in the woods. Isn't that going to be scary?' A bunch of trees? Get a grip, Evangeline. What's scary about a bunch of trees? They'll be perfect. A perfect place for us to hide. And then we'll go home in the morning. But what will we say to Mum and Dad about where we've been? We'll say we were so upset about the silver dress that we got on the wrong bus and spent the night in the woods and had no way of contacting them. After the first bus dropped us off, we bought ourselves some snacks and drinks at the shop with some of our pocket money. We caught the second bus that dropped us on this asphalt road outside Portland in a heavily forested area. Me and my sister climbed out of the bus and thanked the driver. It was when we were walking on the edge of the asphalt road towards the woodgrove that I was overcome with an avalanche of doubts. In my mind, the mere idea of sleeping in a woodgrove at night seemed something effortlessly straightforward to accomplish. It would be just sleeping between some trees, would it not? But in the cold light of day, facing the stark reality of what seemed like a stupendous idea, seemed more than a little intimidating. But we had come this far. I was hardly about to change my plans now. I had resolutely made up my mind that this was what we were going to do, and I was not about to waver or vacillate in my decisions. After all, I was the wiser of the two sisters, so I called the shots. I couldn't allow Evangeline to see me lose my nerve. Me and my sister trudged through the verdant forest, where a gentle breeze blew against our faces. The tall, towering Douglas firs, western cedars, big-leaf maples and ponderosa pine trees were so much bigger than I'd ever envisaged. Their long vertical trunks seemed to pencil up into the sky like straight towers, bedecked with viridescent finery, while their little boughs jiggled in the wind like extended tentacles of an octopus, as if the trees were ushering us into the woodgrove with hundreds of welcoming hands. We ambled through the woods, pressing our rubber sneakers down on the black earthen floor, richly carpeted in old leaves and pine needles. The smell of pine, a sweet buttery smell with peppery and minty notes, wafted in the air, mingled with fresh earthy smells. We trudged awkwardly ever forwards, stomping over mossy logs, carefully weaving our way around open feathery ferns, tufts of grass and forest foliage of varying varieties, of that which I am not well acquainted with. After all, I'm a city girl that has no real appreciation or proficient understanding of the countryside. My obvious ignorance and apparent lack of sentient knowledge already hitting me over the head like an ice-cold glass of water. The ground becomes more spongy under our feet. I was looking for the perfect spot for us to sleep for the night. Then I find it in an old shed that has been built a long time ago. It was possibly used in the past for storing wood. I'm not sure. The ground is dirty, but breaking off a piece of ponderosa pine, me and my sister sweep the dust away from the floor, carefully eliminating spiders and crawling insects that have made this dilapidated building home. They scurry away quickly. We then sit down on the hard warped floor. Are we really going to sleep on this floor tonight? It's so hard. I snap at my sister belligerently. Do we have a choice in the matter? Now stop complaining, Evangeline. Evangeline knows that when I snap at her, it's her cue to shut up, and she does so quickly. We both sit down together in this tight little narrow shelter, our legs rubbing against each other, as we momentarily relax our torsos against the walls that are made up of cracking rotten wood that is being ravaged by termites. We can hear the bird song through the valley, the chirrups, the warbles, the tweets. The wind blows the occasional leaf up in the air, which dances up in the breeze like a lonely butterfly, while the light of the forest begins to dim, taking on a yellow-orangey glaze, until finally the light seeps away, like the water draining away from a sink. The bird's song fades and dissipates, while a greyness descends over the forest, becoming greyer and greyer and greyer by the second. Shadows consume the ground, and then in a single long breath, all our eyes can see is black. It is so pitch black that I had no idea which way was east or which was west, as it suddenly felt as if the whole forest had closed in on us inauspiciously and was sucking away my very breath. I was screaming inside my mind with terror. I felt trapped in this treacherously tenebrous, unsmiling, hostile place that was so intimidatingly spooky, with a formidable sense of belligerent foreboding. But on the outside my expression remains completely cool-headed, self-possessed and unruffled, for the benefit of my sister, who is unable to see my expression. "I'm scared," she whispers to me. "I'm really scared, Emma. I'm not sure it's a good idea us staying here all night. I can't even see my hand before my face." "Don't be silly. Don't be such a little baby. The forest is dark. In the morning it'll be light, and then we'll be out of here." My sister shudders. She opens her bags, feeling around for a bottle of chocolate milk she brought. She hands me one. The sweet cold chocolate soothes my troubled heart, as it soothingly slips down my throat, offering me a brief measure of comfort. I'm secretly cursing myself. What was I thinking, getting us to sleep in a forest all night? I'd never known it would be like this. The trees that surround us in this darkness are blacker than the night, with dense vertical silhouettes like imposing, menacing giants. As they move in the wind, it's like they're whispering to each other about us, as if their intentions towards us are exceedingly nefarious. It's almost as if the forest itself is conspiring against us. I can sense insects crawling around us in the dark, and small animals rising out of the dead layers of leaves, burrowing towards us. Despite the reassuring sounds of crickets and frogs, for me there was so much noise in this silence, especially the noise of my own dreadful fear, as my thoughts thunder with anxiety. It is when I see several pairs of yellow eyes moving towards us that my percolating anxiety screams out like a whistling kettle that reaches a boiling point. I hear a blood-curdling loud scream and wonder where it's coming from, until I realize it's my own voice, and my sister joins me in this distressing wailing sound. It's so discomposing that it travels through the woods like an air raid siren. If we don't want anyone to know where we are, we've certainly done a great job in alerting every living soul in this forest to our presence. What were we thinking? The animals with the bright yellow eyes begin to scurry away. Our screams have scared them off for the time being, but they continue to watch us from a distance, their curiosity in us aroused. "What are they?" whispers my sister anxiously. "Those creatures with the yellow eyes, what are they? And why are they watching us?" "Coyotes, I think," I tell her. Suddenly we hear these heavy feet pounding the forest floor. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Could things get any worse than this? On hearing that noise, the yellow eyes that had been watching us, whatever is coming towards us, has even scared off the coyotes. Oh my God, what could it be? We hear the ominous sound again. My heart is now doing gymnastic flip-flops in my chest. It's thumping so loudly that it drowns out the noise of the creature coming towards us. We cannot see anything, only this indistinct, towering, thick silhouette, shaped like a giant, devoid of any definition, that gives off a glittering yellow eye-shine. A voice is speaking to us. It sounds human. It sounds female. I don't even understand the language. Umanwik, Amanuloko, Madasawin. "Hello, madam. I don't understand what you're saying. We're scared, madam. Could you help us get out of this forest? It's so dark in here. We can't see a thing. There's some coyotes over there. I think they're interested in us." The next thing I know, a hand grabs my hand, and a hand grabs my sister's hand on the other side. I know it sounds crazy, but I feel safe. I'm not sure whose hands we're holding, but they've got to be human, haven't they? The person speaks in a foreign language, so me and my sister, with our bags over our shoulders and our hands held firmly by a tall human being that we can't actually see, allow ourselves to be guided through the forest. It's incredible how this stranger knows exactly where to go, so we don't trip over a single thing, No logs covered with moss, no ferns or forest foliage. We cannot see how this foreign stranger can see so precisely in the dark. That is what we find so extraordinary. We find ourselves being guided down an open trail that leads to the pavement that fringes the asphalt road. The soft ethereal moonlight lights up the dark shadows. I look up to find that the hand I'm holding belongs to an 8-foot enormous creature, which I realise is a Bigfoot. Her deep-set eyes look down at me. They're golden in colour and filled with an awe-consuming love. Emeno omana ananono bogo. You're safe now. I hear her words interpreted in my own head. Me and my sister watch her in awe as she breaks down a ponderosa pine tree branch, placing it in the middle of the road. I realise she's doing this so that the next car that comes this way will have to stop to remove the branch out of the way, so that we will easily get help. The protective female Bigfoot with her fabulous matriarch energy stands with us loyally and waits. We hear the distinctive sound of a car engine purring down the road. A man sighs. He groans as he opens his car door, marching towards the branch, pushing it away, and marching back to his car. The creature indicates for us to remain hidden behind the trees with her. Omokopa anakalano dobogo. Not good man, she whispers in our heads. Yumokot abagalano. You must wait. 2 more people drive up to the branch and climb out of their cars. But the Bigfoot tells us again in our heads, she's not sure. The energy is wavering. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. The next person that stops his truck and climbs out of the door to push the branch away, the critter pushes us forward. She says, Omoko bagalasha, okoshanafa. Good man, I hear in my head. To cut a long story short, the Bigfoot was absolutely right about the man she chose for us. It turned out he was a much-beloved pastor of a local church who drove us directly home, even though I got it so badly wrong about the both of us staying in the woods overnight. I'm glad to have met the real live Bigfoot. It turned out that stealing the silvery dress seemed to pale into insignificance when my parents thought we were both missing. They were so heartily grateful that we'd been found and returned home safely. So much so that the silvery dress we'd stolen barely received a single mention. We were not even reprimanded for our bad, reprehensible behaviour. My father told me, of course, never to steal again, and that if I wanted something so desperately badly, like I'd wanted that silver dress, I was to ask for it first. Suffice to say, my father brought me that silver dress to wear to Tonya's birthday party, as he knew it had meant so much for me. But after everything we'd been through, it somehow had lost its shine. I've never been able to forget the kind Bigfoot whom rescued us and led us by the hand safely through the woodgrove. She was such a kind, protective, nurturing soul. I will never be able to forget her as long as I live. So there you are. That's my story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I had not expected this, not for a single moment, but when the light shorted in the marquee, my heart missed a beat. Everything was swathed in such a haunting, airy, velvety blackness that only the bouncing flames from the candles cast their shadows across people's faces while shooting up the canvas walls. Their ethereal flickers only added confusion to the chaos. In a trice the DJ's music became still, very still, and in the sound of such intense silence the inward wailing screams of the guests could be heard. The wedding guests reach out, grabbing each other nervously, fumbling around for arms and shoulders to cling on to for support, as alarmed, frightened people are calling out each other's names in the darkness, feeling lost, vulnerable in this dusky void where a sense of hopelessness can so easily be found. "Freya, is that you?" cries one woman's voice as she navigates the darkness with her arms, doing breaststroke-like manoeuvres across the marquee. Voices sound frayed, pinched and nervous. Some have risen up a notch or two in volume to high-pitched squeals that sound much more like an animal noise than that of a human. It's difficult to distinguish the guests or to hear whereabouts they're located in the marquee, as the visibility is so diminished, and without even a cell phone light in the tent, you can't see a single thing. The bride insisted on no cell phones tonight. None were allowed at her wedding. The energy is cloying to the marquee like the barnacles on a turtle, fraught, tense, tight. The anxiety is at fever pitch, and many are wallowing in their terror, bathing in its blackness, tasting its sense of foreboding, drinking its saltiness, and sensing its deadliness. It would seem for many, myself included in this regard, it is as if we're almost locked under its spell, surrendering to its mighty power, resigned to the impending fate, or whatever it'll dish out for us tonight, because let's just say, the dinner that has been prepared by the chef's team, the head chef being my husband, in the outside tent next to the marquee, is possibly the last thing on people's minds right now, as rumbling stomachs screaming with hunger have been replaced by squirming guts that feel like hundreds of mice are gnawing away at your insides. Everyone is inwardly filled by a great angst, crying out to be rescued from this desolate abyss. In the merciless darkness, people struggle to find their friends, as amidst this uncongenial, treacherous ocean of black that has ravenously devoured the light, it is what you can't see that troubles you the most. For anything inauspiciously foreboding could be loitering in the dark shadows, waiting to pounce on an unsuspecting victim. For tonight's energy embodies all that is evil, malevolent, insanely wicked. And if I didn't know any better, I would say the devil and his minions had been invited to his wedding. It's difficult to even discern your hand before your face. An angry storm is raging outside the tent, only adding more fuel to the drama that is unfolding on this inauspicious night. It's building itself up into a frantic frenzy. It whips up from the ocean, soaring over the cliff so aggressively, shrieking and battering the marquee with a brute force, punneling it so hard that with every jolting shudder the whole marquee begins to groan and heave as the metal scaffolding vibrates and grumbles, almost as if in any moment now the marquee just might collapse on top of us. I hold my breath, hardly daring to believe that this is actually happening at my wedding venue, of all places. I would never have envisaged this happening in a million years, but it seems as if my worst nightmare has finally been realized. Maybe if I close my eyes very tightly again and squeeze them so hard and then open them, I'll find that this has all been just a horrible dream. But this is no dream. This is real. The ties of the door have loosened, and they're flapping vigorously against the entrance. It's like we're claustrophobically cocooned and confined to this darkness, surrounded by the thunderous roar of the weather, beholden to its mercy. Every soul in this tent is poignantly aware of this fact, as you would be, of course, if you were in a plane that had lost its momentum and was now plunging towards the sea with only moments to spare. Danger is something innately built in all of us. We can sense and feel it, as everyone does in this tent right now. It seems so enigmatically strange, peculiar even, that only an hour before things had been so innocently benign. As in the fading light, after the people had left the chapel, they were served cocktails by waiters and waitresses, bedecked in the traditional black ensemble, and offering the guests light refreshments, served on large silver platters that were gratefully received by all. All this occurred while the guests, over 150 of them, observed photographs being taken of the bride and groom. Some stunningly dramatic pictures against the rugged, jagged rocks of the cliffs, where the bride's ethereal, floating, thin, wispy silken dress, so delicate, so fragile, so elegant against the rocks, conjured up pictures denoting hard with soft, dark with light, powerful with fragile. And as any photographer will tell you, taking pictures on this rugged, remote piece of coastline is every artist's dream come true. This afternoon the rising wind has only bespeckled the photographs with even more dramatic appeal and aplomb, with hair blowing back in the wind, and the floating waves of the bride's dress dancing against the rocky cliffs. You can't buy drama like this. If you were to attain it in Hollywood, it would cost you big bucks. But here on the wild Oregon coast, it's entirely free. For nature does not hold back on her advances, nor does she have much self-restraint when she gives, and when she does, her generosity is bountiful, and when she takes away, it can be deadly. A plethora of wedding guests stand there over the rugged coastline, like a colony of seals, watching the events unfold, with a glass of effervescent bubbly in their hands and a canapé in their fingers. The little Bellinis with cream cheese, salmon and a spattering of caviar are going down a treat tonight. Or this evening, shall I say. Of course I wouldn't have expected less. I know what people enjoy. The guests are sipping their champagne, while drinking the saltiness of the sea air, appreciating the fabulous transfixing views that spread out before them like a resplendent painting. Their eyes feast on the satiny long white ribbon of beach that smoothly glides down the coastline like a golden asphalt road, while the rippling ocean, with its crashing tumultuous waves, some pounding against the sculptural rocks, generously caresses their foaming white froth over the cliff face, as if washing the dirty grime off a giant child's face. If your eyes sweep up to the very top of those cliffs, standing there proud and tall, like the crown on a king's head, is a large white 4-story Georgian house that can accommodate over 50 sleeping guests, a graciously proportioned classic building, with an understated elegance and a pleasing symmetry, based on the golden ratio, with generous white sash windows that stare out over the ocean, the beach, the vertical silhouettes of the trees, the rugged cliff face, like bright eyes that see everything and miss nothing. This is the illustrious wedding venue me and my husband own, that came into my possession by way of a rich inheritance from a great uncle of mine. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to assure myself it really is ours, for we are indeed lucky to own such a resplendent place in a remote part of the Oregon coast, renowned for some less than savoury weather conditions. But let's just not talk about that right now. As the sun begins to set, after a long hard day of shine, the guests audibly ooh and ah with delight, as a tangerine sun begins to melt into the sky, like liquid white chocolate, infusing the vast panoramic firmament with a collage of colourful layers, from pinks, golds, mauves and purples, like bright colours being folded into a white glossy meringue. In a trice, as if by a flick of a light switch, the weather changes, as the sunset is swept away from the peninsula, which is now beginning to gradually deepen, slowly but surely, going at its own methodical pace, where hurry is certainly not invited. It develops a mottled grey appearance, accompanied by a grey sombre bleakness that does not smile warmly on the wedding guests, but physically scowls down at them, as if to deny them much welcome. A wind beats up from the coast, its ugly gnarled hands pulling at women's silk dresses, rudely tugging at their groomed, immaculate hairstyles, and biting viciously at their cheeks. I instruct everyone to get to the marquee as quickly as possible. The guests don't need much prompting. They clutch elaborate hats, graced with feathers and silken flowers to heads. They pull skirts down modestly with hands, and then they tear high-heeled shoes off feet to increase their pace, as they dash fervently across the soft green turf towards the marquee, sighing with relief to be cushioned from the cruel blows of the unforgiving weather, welcome to the safe confines of a magnolious, splendacious canvas that has been transformed into a glorious, glamorous den, with beautiful arrangements of flowers scattered liberally throughout the tent, tables laid in golden red finery, and a coconut matting that resembles a rustic carpet glides across the floor, like a rich red turf, the perfect nesting place for very tired feet. The guests this evening are obliviously unaware that things are going to get so much worse tonight, a whole lot worse. But then ignorance is bliss, until of course you're caught up in the eye of the storm, when your naivety will almost certainly not serve your best interests well. But let's not talk about that yet, as the guests are gathered and the wedding speeches are about to progress. In truth, I can't remember how many wedding speeches I've had to sit through over the years. Some of them can drone on and on, like a static radio you wish you could shut up. Sometimes even the guests can't hide the boredom creeping across their faces, as they fiddle awkwardly with glasses. But I know what they're thinking. I've seen it in their eyes all too often. "Make it short, please make it short," they inwardly beg. It's going to be interesting what the bride's mother has to say. I notice she's twitching nervously as she walks up to the front of the tent to face the seated gathering of people, as all eyes are fixed on her. I'd place the bride's mother as being in her late 40s, an attractive woman with a short, stylish hairstyle swept away from her face, highlighted in pretty honeys, blondes and chestnuts, wearing a turquoise blue slip of a dress that flatters her. It's got that bohemian, floating quality to it that dances around her ankles prettily. She stands there nervously, clenching her fists so tightly that I can actually see the whites of her knuckles showing. I can tell she'd rather be anywhere else in the world than standing in front of the crowd of people right now. I can see the bride and the groom are smiling up at her encouragingly, as if to whisper, "You can do it! You can do it! We believe in you!" She seems uplifted by their blind faith in her. The bride's mother takes a sip of champagne for a twist of Dutch courage, I suspect, to steady her frazzled nerves, and then places it down on the table. The glass, I mean. All eyes remained focused on her, and the only sound that can be heard is a soft wind beating against the tent. But nothing to be bothered about yet. Not yet. I mean, this is the coast after all, and people expect a wee bit of wind in these parts. It goes with the territory, and maybe even adds to the ambience. That is, of course, if the weather remains pleasingly subtle. But tonight the guests will learn that there is nothing subtle nor amenable about the windstorm tonight. The bride's mother puts the cordless microphone to her lips. "I'd like to welcome everyone to the wedding of my daughter Victoria and her husband Charlie." Everyone claps, and a few whistles serenade the proceedings that seem to give the bride's mother a much-needed boost of confidence that is clearly well needed. She giggles nervily in the microphone. "You think I'd be good at this by now, wouldn't you?" she jokes. "After all, I've done 2 speeches before, but in the last 5 years or so. I mean, you'd think I'd be a dab hand at this by now, but as you can see, I'm trembling," she says, stretching out her arm to the crowd to demonstrate this point. It is true, her hand is actually shuddering. "I've never been good at facing a crowd, even with such a sea of kind, warm faces greeting me, looking at me with such bright, sunny expressions. Many of you who I do know well. I know what you're all thinking. Has my daughter finally found the one? Well, I can only say that when I first met Charlie, I was in no doubt my daughter had struck gold. Charlie is the type of gentleman that will keep you on your toes. Victoria gets easily bored, but let's just say Charlie will keep her guessing. My daughter needs that in a man. I'm sure my husband is looking down at us from heaven, smiling down on the proceedings tonight. If he was here, sweetheart, he would have been so very proud of you, to see you now, and how magnificently beautiful you look in your stunning fishtail wedding dress that becomes you so well. It's been a year since my husband Victoria's father died so fortuitously, and my daughter has been my greatest strength for me during this time." "Thank you, sweetheart, for that." The bride's mother's eyes meet her daughter's, and her daughter nods and smiles in response, as if acknowledging the tough time they'd shared together after the bride's father's passing. She continues, "I will confess that even as a child my daughter couldn't keep still, had to be doing things all the time. I was surprised she didn't have that ADHD they talk about, but she didn't. It would seem she's just an incredibly adventurous person. I think she's found her match in Charlie here. So let's raise our glasses and give the happy couple a toast to a long and happy marriage with lots of excitement. And a couple of grandchildren on the way would be very, very much appreciated. I'm certainly looking forward to becoming a grandmother." The couple sitting next to me, on the table next to mine, snigger to themselves. A woman whispers to her husband. "I'll give it less than a year," she chides. "Victoria will have spat him out by Christmas." I can see the bride's mother knocking back the champagne, quickly being congratulated for her bravery and courage by both the bride and groom, who are talking to her earnestly, possibly praising her effusively for the speech with a plethora of well-dones. You know, the usual thing. The bride's mother is smiling, looking as if the entire weight of the world has been lifted off her shoulders. She really didn't want to do that wedding speech. Little does she know how very soon her little speech is going to seem like a walk in the park. The best man walks assertively over to the podium, grinning brightly. He moves with a confident swagger and a sanguine gait, with none of the nervous, self-effacing insecurity of the bride's mother. None of that clouds his delivery in the slightest. You might think his audacious self-confidence was cocky or arrogant, but not so. I think he's just naturally a very extrovert character, with a convivial personality that people naturally warm to. It seems that the crowd at this wedding party really love him. "Welcome, everyone," he says. "I'm so glad you could make it. Let's not kid, it's windy out there. But then that would be expected at this time of the year, and by the coast, of course. I am informed that this location is particularly exposed to the wind, situated out here in such a wild spot. When Charlie informed me that he and Victoria were going to have their wedding at a gorgeous location, a Georgian house perched on a cliff face overlooking the Oregon coast, I had no idea it would be this transfixing. But you've surprised us, Charlie, as usual. This place is a treasure. It almost feels as if we're stranded together, all of us wedding guests, on a deserted island, which gives a very romantic quality to the wedding tonight. I'm sure you will agree with that." "Hear, hear!" cry the guests, clapping. "Well, for those of you that are less acquainted with me, let me just say I've known Charlie all my life. He's always been the intrepid explorer, so to speak. We've ended up in all kinds of scrapes together over the years. So yes, I would say Charlie is one of those people that gets rather bored too easily. So like Victoria, they both have a lot in common there. The girls, of course, have always been attracted to Charlie, for some absurd, unfathomable reason. He raises a cheeky eyebrow, rolls his eyes at the back of his head, and jokes. I can't, for the life of me, figure out why. Everyone claps, cheers and giggles. "No, we can't imagine why," comes one woman's voice from the crowd. "We can't possibly imagine why. Just look at him." "Yes, you're right there. Look at him," chuckles the best man. "Let's just say with Charles' bouncing blonde curls, licking his collar, and those lapis lazuli blue eyes, he's been pushing the girls away forever and a day. But not Victoria here. When Charlie told me he'd met someone, he said it with such a solemnness, it got my attention at once. Charlie hasn't been serious about anything a day in his life. So when his deep voice told me on the phone, 'I've met someone,' I knew this was the one. Of course, when I met Victoria, I could see why they were so good together. They complement each other. They're adventurous, ambitious, curious, inquisitive, with a passionate zeal for life." He raises his glass to the bride and groom. "May you both have a long, happy marriage. Oh, and I know I'm expected to say a joke, am I not? What every best man is supposed to do, I believe. I have a couple for you here," he says, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper from the back pocket of his pants. He reads the jokes to an ebullient, very responsive audience. "Every time a little boy went to a playmate's house, he found the friend's grandmother deeply engrossed in the Bible. Finally, his curiosity got the better of him. He asked his friend, 'Why do you suppose your grandmother reads the Bible so much?' 'I'm not sure,' he says. 'I think she's cramming for her finals.' Everyone laughs, claps, and cries, 'More! More! More!' 'Just as well I came prepared,' says the best man, reading another joke on his paper. 'I knew you would be a tough crowd to please. It seems I was right. Here goes. At the wedding party, the young woman admonished her husband. 'That's the 5th time you've gone back for ice cream and cake. Aren't you a little bit embarrassed that you look like such a greedy pig? I wonder what people are thinking of your insatiable greed.' 'Well, why should I be bothered in the slightest?' he says. 'I just tell everyone that the puddings are for you.' Everyone roars and claps. 'More! More! More!' 'All right, one more,' he grins.
And then that's that."
"Nothing looks good on me anymore," wailed a customer, modelling an outfit she was planning to wear to her wedding in front of the department store mirror.
"Nonsense, ma'am," says the sales clerk. "The dress says it all."
"That's the problem," says the woman. "I need a dress that keeps its mouth shut." Everyone cheers, and then the groom walks up to the podium, pats his best friend on the back, thanking him for the speech, and then he proceeds to take the mic.
"Thank you, everyone, for coming here today. As all of you know, I have no parents here today to deliver any speeches. They're both in Rwanda, dealing with the victims of trauma, a decade after the war, suffering from serious post-traumatic stress disorder, which means many are requiring seriously psychological treatment, upon which my parents are the pioneers of some cutting-edge breakthroughs in post-traumatic stress disorder therapy. So they're currently working with doctors out there, rebuilding the psychiatric facility for the seriously depressed. And so although they would like to be here today, they have far more pressing issues to address." He pulls out a paper from a pocket and reads the letter to the wedding crowd. "Me and my wife can only apologise for not being at your wedding ceremony today. But our love and wishes are for you both to have a long and happy marriage. We love you both very much." The groom seems to tear up, but holds his composure. Anyone can see he adores his parents and is bitterly disappointed they're not here for his wedding. But he overcomes his sorrowful reflection and courageously trudges on with the speech. "I'm not much of a speaker," said the groom, "so forget long speeches. You're not going to get one from me. Besides, I hate long speeches. But I do want to thank you for coming today to celebrate my marriage to my beloved Victoria. Victoria," he says, looking directly at the bride, giving her a lovely winning smile, showing off his sweeping mouth with the whitest teeth that I've ever seen, that, let's just say, are a tad too perfect, perhaps. But his smile is so genuinely broad. It could almost bounce off his face like a rubber ball. If he's not careful, that is. His magnificent blue eyes are pinned onto her brown ones, never leaving them for a single moment. She beams back at him brightly. Her eyes are locked in his adoring gaze. She raises her glass. They've definitely got chemistry, I decide. But it's early days, and chemistry is not the long-lasting glue that necessarily holds a marriage together. Although it helps. It definitely helps. I should know. I've seen so many weddings come and go over the years. You get a sense about these things. Is this marriage going to last? I ask myself, as if examining the odds of a horse race at the Derby. I'm not sure. It looks promising, but I've learnt from the knocks and shocks in my own life that looks can be exceedingly deceptive. The good news about the wedding today is it's all under my control, which gives me a small measure of power. It's my day to play God. Our lives are messy. Everyone knows that. But I can make the next 24 hours of this bride's life go idyllically, like the most perfect consummate dream. I am rather like, shall we say, Cinderella's fairy godmother, even without a pumpkin at my disposal, or a pair of glittering silver slippers. I do a pretty mean job, even if I say so myself. I'm very good at what I do. No point in pretending otherwise, or trying to hide my light under a bushel. What happens after that is their concern, not mine. Their point of the journey is entirely up to them. I can, however, curate the next few hours of their lives, and make everything flow seamlessly. I'm delighted to say that everything is running smoothly. My husband, as per usual, has excelled himself in his culinary performance this evening, but that doesn't surprise me at all. I wouldn't expect less from him. We make an excellent team, the two of us, as husband and wife. Tonight he has masterfully prepared the exemplary meal, with his usual je ne sais quoi, or amazing flair. The guests tonight are going to be treated to a phenomenal dining experience they shan't easily forget. But then the bride and groom have deep pockets. They paid for the very best in everything, not skimping on a single thing. I love customers like that, who don't try and haggle with me, or try to bring down the price. It does make my life so much more easier. I've had my share of difficult brides over the years. It goes with the territory of being a venue organiser. I've been made to run around the place like a headless chicken. I'm glad the bride and groom tonight have been a lot less challenging than some of my more demanding couples.
The bride insisted on not having a band, not even for the pre-wedding drinks, which is a tad unusual. But each to his own, as I always say. I want disco music, she says. Everyone likes disco music that they can dance to. I find bands so boringly dull. I can't stand them. Whether the groom agrees with her or not, he's not saying. After all, what the bride wants, the bride gets. No questions asked, no protests raised. There are only 50 guests staying in the Georgian house tonight. The other 100 will be making their way back home the way they arrived, by car, Uber or bus, I imagine. I did glance at the weather gauge on the wall. It said overcast. I did think of taking it down so as not to alarm the bride. But then overcast is not something to get your knickers in a twist about, is it? It's commonly overcast around here. But what I've not told the bride about our location is that it is vulnerable to blustering wind conditions that can get a little rambunctious. But the less said about that, the better, of course. Everyone can hear the wind wailing out there. But it's not threatening, nor is it out of control. I've always had everything under control myself. Well, that's what I always used to think. But after tonight is complete, I will soon learn that the control for a wedding is not always in my hands, and that even a fairy godmother cannot orchestrate the weather.
Thank you, the groom continues, for making me the happiest man in the world, Victoria. And thank you, everyone, for coming here tonight to celebrate our very special occasion, especially those of you who travelled far to get here. We're exceedingly grateful and glad that you've joined us. The groom raises his glass. Everyone cheers. Now a toast to all of you, to absent friends who cannot be here today. I can see the bride wiping a sorry tear away from her face. She's clearly not wanting to mess up her perfectly applied makeup that has been lacquered to her face with a neat precision by, I believe, one of Cannon Beach's most illustrious makeup artists, usually only hired by the rich and famous. So no, she can't mess that makeup up. That would be a grievous mistake, would it not? And possibly ruin all her wedding photographs with black blotches running down her skin. I must admit the couple has hired a very attentive photographer. I don't know where they got him from, but he's snapping away as if he's got ants in his pants. I think he's gay, which is why the bride seemed to love him so much. Well, to put no finer point on it, he's definitely gay. He hasn't stopped for a moment. He keeps waving his arms around frantically. He looks like a temperamental artsy-fartsy type that would probably throw a fit if the bride was having a bad hair day. I was told in confidence that he was asked to take some rather naughty poses of the bride in her lingerie this morning, as a last-minute gift she decided to give her husband. But I gather he went a tad further than that, and did a whole shoot for her on the cliff face. I could see after the session he appeared to be quite enervated. He started to kick back rather too much French champagne. I imagine the shoot rather pandered to his artistic leanings, and delighted him somewhat. Despite his alcoholic indulgences, he seems pretty steady on his feet. That is, if you take away his swirling arms, that rather remind me of an octopus tentacles, as they swing precariously all over the place. I did notice he knocked a couple of people's champagne glasses out of their hands earlier on, and got a few irritated sideways glances, but it's water off a duck's back to him. He doesn't care. I know the bride's thinking of her father who was killed in a motorbike accident a year prior. I can see that nostalgic, wistful, longing look on her face. She so wishes he was here. Of course she does. There'll be no father-daughter dance for her tonight. Little do I know that tonight there will be no dancing for anyone at all. In fact, a dancing will be the last thing on people's minds, for they will be entertained by things a whole lot more sinister than that. No, this is a wedding party that will never be forgotten, but not in a good way. The groom continues in his monotone voice, that becomes initially more interesting and arrests the crowd's attention the moment food is mentioned. People are very transparent the moment you mention food. There's always a hopeful glint in people's eyes, and an upward tug on the corners of the mouth, a suggestion of a smile that they are fighting to suppress, because they don't want to seem too eager about eating. I hope you're hungry, he says. The food tonight is delicious. Another reason we chose this venue, as our great chef tonight is married to the owner of this venue, and he has a James Beard Award behind him. Nothing to be sneezed at. To keep you on the breast of things, we're starting with foie gras, with rhubarb and duck or chilled watercress and lettuce velouté, with scallops or cheese soufflé with cranberry compote. And for the mains, it's Dexter beef served with Jerusalem artichokes, venison leg cooked in hay, or partridge with pears. And then for pudding, my wife here has insisted on molten lava cake with homemade vanilla ice cream. As usual, it had to be something chocolate.
I sigh with relief as the waiters arrive on the scene to start studiously serving the delicious menu, starting of course with the hors d'oeuvres, but singling out the vegetarians first at this wedding party for their unique orders. Soon champagne is being generously poured out, voices are humming away happily, people are laughing, there's much merriment. And then, of course, they're eagerly tucking into their first courses, marvelling at the deliciousness of the food. The DJ is playing his background music. The ambience is very congenial and very uplifting, until, of course, the lights go out. Everything is in darkness. Never in a million years at a venue had I expected this to happen. It did happen on one occasion, but the lights bounced back so quickly. But not tonight. Everything is now steeped in an ominous blackness that is so tangible it almost seeps through your clothes into every cell of your body, sending spiralling chills down your spine. This does not feel good. Perhaps I'm not so in control as I thought as a wedding planner. For one thing, I can execute no power over the weather, or the electrics for that matter, if they get shorted in a very bad storm. And by the looks of things, this is not just any storm. Suddenly I feel powerless, like the fairy godmother who has had her magic powers extricated from her, and has to surrender to a greater, deadlier power that is out of her control to manipulate or conquer. This is not funny. Not funny at all. People's voices become almost disembodied and faint, as the wind roars to a frenzy, charging against the marquee like a tsunami of feisty ocean waves, crashing violently against the rocks with an irate angriness that cannot be suppressed or controlled. This is one hell of a storm, and granted I knew that the weather was expected to be partly cloudy and overcast, but this I did not expect. We've had storms on the Oregon coast 100 times before, and windy conditions naturally go with the territory here. But a wind like this, even I have never encountered. It leaves a bodeful feeling clinging to my guts, like the bottom feeders in a fish tank. I feel as if my insides are gnawing inside of me. I hate not being in control. I'm supposed to be managing the evening, making sure the lights should have come back on by now. But they have failed us. Everything has failed us tonight. It is hard to feel that this storm is not personal, as if the storm itself has reserved its wrath for us. When the bride booked my venue, she told me trouble followed her wherever she went. She believed she attracted adverse circumstances to her like bees to a honeypot. I'm beginning to think she might be right. I don't want anything to go wrong with my wedding, she told me. At my last wedding we were caught up in a cyclone, and then my other wedding the venue was completely flooded. I remember thinking, bloody hell, how many weddings have you had, young lady? At a guess I'd say she looked 25 years old, certainly no more, and was going down the aisle a third time without even batting an eyelid. Should she not be a teensy-weensy concerned about that? Obviously not. If she continued this way, she might actually have more weddings behind her than I've had hot dinners. I bit my lip. I didn't say anything, but if the boot were on the other foot, I would almost certainly have taken my time getting married for the third time in a row. If I had 2 failed weddings behind me, that is. Are people not supposed to be wary after making mistakes? It doesn't seem so. Some people keep diving into the deep end with the sharks, hoping that this time they miraculously won't get bitten. For me, I adhere to the wizened old saying, once burnt, twice shy. I mean, I've been a wedding venue coordinator for many years now, before I actually inherited the Georgian house on the hill that I had converted into a wedding venue. I've seen things in my line of work that will automatically make your hair curl. I've been running our wedding venue for over 4 years now. Fairweather Heights. Are you kidding me? There's nothing fair about the weather tonight that has conspired against us. What induced me to call my venue that name? There really is nothing fair about the weather here. When the bride hinted at trouble following her wherever she went, I'm beginning to think she's not wrong. I'm seized with regret that I accepted her business, for this treacherous storm is most certainly not for the faint-hearted. It would be so easy to run to the white Georgian house on the hill 300 feet away from the tent tonight, but this is impossible. Leaving the marquee could be a precarious risk. The wind could literally fling you over the cliff face to your death, and tonight it could do just that, especially as everything is pitch black out there. You can't see a thing. It is safer to stay in the marquee until the storm dies, but this is a wedding I would sooner forget. I think I'm not alone in these thoughts. How I would like to be safely tucked behind the high walls of the Georgian mansion. But although so painfully close, it's extensively too far away to brave the elements, to get back to the safe security of the house. Some fearsome baleful storms you just don't mess with, this being one of them. This cautionary storm is like a grumpy, cantankerous man, who's far too big for his boots, is almost certainly hell-bent on getting his own way this evening, peritonaciously determined to be the absolute centre of attention, like a miserable, somewhat highly opinionated wedding guest at a dinner table that you're just going to have to endure all night long, come hell or high water, whether you actually like it or not. I pull out the torch that I carry in my pocket as a matter of regular habit. I gasp in an obsequious horror, for as the wind whips around the tent, howling, moaning, whistling, wailing, screaming, lamenting, and roaring, my torchlight focuses on the red velvet cake that the bride had ordered. Oh my goodness, it's beginning to heave and groan, as if it too has had quite enough of this storm. The sumptuously decadent, delicious, exclusive cake cost an arm and a leg, and the bride didn't flinch at the cost, not even for a second. Its 4 magnificent rounded layers, white perfect frosting, masterfully detailed sugar flowers covering a bright, rich red sponge. But even as I watch the cake, it's cracking. It bursts open. It explodes, collapsing all over the marquee, tumbling on the ground, breaking apart. It looks like a bloody congealed mess. The white looks like human skin and flesh. The red looks ominously like blood. If you didn't know better, you'd think someone had been murdered. Then the worst thing happens. A woman's deadly scream rings out as she catches a glimpse of the cake from the light of my torch. I didn't want her to see that. I know exactly what it looks like. She's got the complete wrong end of the stick. This is all I need. A hysterical woman on my watch. The woman lets out a disembodied scream that roars through the tent and is only accentuated by the whipping sounds of the wind ferociously punching the tent. Someone's been murdered! Someone's been murdered! There's a dead body over there! There's blood everywhere! Someone's been murdered! There is a hush, followed by sobs and cries from frightened people, who cradle in the darkness, clinging to each other for support. Calm down, everyone, I shout. There's nothing to worry about. Please stay calm. No one's been murdered tonight. Unfortunately, the wind caused the red velvet wedding cake to burst open, and I'm afraid it does look like a bloody mess. Relieved laughs ring around the tent at this revelation, but the notes of anxiety can be discerned in their voices. Can't someone bloody put a light on somewhere? Said a man's voice. It's freaking us out in here. The weather is doing our nuts. Look, everyone, the weather I can do nothing about. None of us can leave the confines of this tent. I want to make that very clear. I'm ordering each and every one of you not to leave. I'm afraid to say the cliffs and rocky outcrops are treacherous out here, especially on a tenebrous night like this. If anyone dares to try go back to the Georgian house in this weather, you are quite simply dicing with death, and I'm not sure you will survive. Even in lesser conditions, people have been swept to their deaths by a feisty wind current out here. And as for the lights, I certainly don't fancy our chances of them coming back on tonight. I think the electric circuits have blown. We're all just going to have to sit through the storm, and we're just going to have to build ourselves up, because quite honestly, there's nothing else we can do. We can only be positive and pray that the storm will finally die.
But this marquee feels as if it's folding in on us, screams a man. We could be blown away in this tent.
I know, but I think it'll contain us safely, and as bad as the weather sounds out there, and whether we like it or not, remaining in the tent is quite frankly our only and safest option.
Some wedding this is turning out to be, comes a man's voice. Every time I've been to one of Victoria's weddings, it's a complete nightmare. But this is a bloody disaster.
I know, I'm sorry, but we just have to stay here. It's too risky for us to try to go back to the Georgian house. All of a sudden I feel a tap on my shoulders. I hear the familiar voice of the groom speaking to me.
I'm so glad I found you, he says in a troubled voice. It's so bloody black in here. I can't see a thing. I'm exceedingly worried about my wife, Victoria. She slipped out of the marquee a couple of minutes ago. I tried to stop her, but she pushed me away. She was going back to the mansion.
This time my face drains of all colour. My heart sinks. But why would she do that? The storm out there is treacherous. It's perilous. She could be blown over the cliffs to her death. Are you kidding me? Why did she go back in the first place? Why did you not stop her? This is crazy.
She was going to get a couple of torches. I did try to stop her, as I was telling you, but she ran out of the tent before I could.
All of a sudden a woman's scream can be heard, coming from outside of the tent a fair way away. A terrifying scream. It courses through my veins, for it is hauntingly airy. It's the kind of murderous scream you expect to hear when someone is wrestling with death, or, not to put too fine a point on it, actually being brutally killed. I know in my heart it is the bride. The energy in the tent has gone quiet, very subdued. No one has said a single word, not even the most stoic among us, as terror has incapacitated the entire crowd, and every heart has surrendered to her powerful hold. I am responsible for this bride. She's in my charge. I can't leave her to the mercy of the elements. I just can't. Not on my watch. So I clandestinely creep out of the tent. I know it's extremely foolish. I won't listen to my own wise counsel, but I have to find her. I can't have another death on my conscience. One was bad enough, and that almost tore me apart. I made sure no one saw me creep out of the tent, as I slipped out with a stealth that was very, very convincing, like a ghost in the night, fading into the shadows, merging with it, becoming one with the cut-out shapes of the landscape. The last thing I want is to unsteady the guests' nerves, as it seems I'm the only reasoning voice of calm in the rising chaos of the wedding. I have perceived some of the guests who have unwillingly surrendered to their fate with a stoic bravery, others unusually silent, while some are sobbing silently, almost ashamed of their tears. There's nothing to be ashamed of about being afraid of a storm like this. I don't know what to feel. Me personally, I'm just very calm. I think all are hoping and praying the marquee will remain above their heads, but seriously doubting it will, as this wind tonight is viciously assaulting everything, and even the wedding cutlery is flying off the tables, so many people are huddling under the tables to avoid getting hit. I can smell real fear in that tent tonight, and when my torch flickered over the sea of earnest faces, I knew people were clinging to hope. They will come out of this ordeal alive. But the weather promises nothing, keeps you guessing. I've asked my husband to keep a watch over things for a moment, but I never even mentioned for a second that I would be sneaking out of the tent like this. I imagine such a move would result in my husband, a man normally reasonably composed, to have kittens. Of course I know I'm dicing with death, adopting this nonsensical manoeuvre that will more than likely kill me. But there are some things you have to do, despite the risks. like trying to get into a burning building to rescue someone. It's in the trying that really counts. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm trying. It doesn't mean there's going to be a successful outcome here. Far from it. But it's in the trying that I can at least live with myself, by admitting I did everything possible to save the bride's life. My heart is sinking. I have graphic visions in my mind, going back a year ago, when the weather was a lot milder than this. A whole lot milder. One of my guests at a wedding party decided to go for a skinny dip in the middle of the ocean, while the guests partied the night away, obliviously unaware that one of the party had been swept out to sea by a gruesome, less than accommodating wind current. The following morning I went down to the beach for a morning stroll, sinking my feet into the deliciously soft sea sand, enjoying the blissful, energizing feel of the early morning shafts of sunlight, hugging me with an invigorating warmth. My husband was back at the house, in the throes of preparing a wedding breakfast for the remaining guests, where champagne and orange juice were being served, and salmon bagels with cream cheese, a delicious cooked English breakfast, and French pâtisserie. I will never forget the horror when I came upon a grisly sight, washed up on the beach like a dead Portuguese man of war. I found myself staring down at the dead white naked body of a man, lying tangled and twisted in the seaweed. At first I thought he had to be a mannequin, but as I looked more closely and poked him with a stick to see if he was real, I discovered he was dead, only to find out later he was one of the missing wedding guests, a good friend of the groom's. Pandemonium broke out on the beach when the groom found his good friend lying there dead. There was wailing and weeping, and let's just say a buoyant wedding weekend ended up seriously punctured, and the final guests left my wedding venue feeling exceedingly flat. I just don't want a repeat of that disaster all over again. It took me a long time to recover from that event. You never forget something like that. It stays with you. It sinks into your DNA, becomes one with who you are. Over the months I've told wedding couples a story, hoping that the precautionary tale will sober and subdue some of their choices here, while staying, in the Georgian farmhouse. But I've learnt one thing about human beings as a venue coordinator, and that is that they live with the false presumptuousness that it's never ever going to happen to them. People can be willfully ignorant, self-deceiving, believing what they want to believe, seeing what they want to see. As I embrace the elements, I try to abandon the thoughts of our dead guest from over a year ago, but the memory is so hauntingly visual and hard to shift on a night like this, like a pendulum swinging brazenly to the forefront of my mind, inviting me to re-energize those memories all over again. Please, no. I really don't want to remember all that. It's funny. When you're facing a hostile, grim, life-threatening situation, the thoughts of death are never far from your mind. But I can't entertain them now. Not now. It will weaken my resolve, intimidate my courage. And I need to do this. I really need to do this. I need to find the bride. The hostile, malevolent wind is brutal. It doesn't take fools gladly, of which I hasten to say the bride is clearly one of them, and I am possibly about to join her there in this regard. I mean, what on earth induced an intelligent woman like her to go out in the middle of a storm like this? It's incongruous, irrational behaviour that is inviting disaster as the guest of honour to join you on your wedding. I mean, I've never seen anything like this storm before. I hope never to again. The wind is violently tearing at my clothes. My black skirt that I'm wearing is flung up against my face. My hair is tossed out of its ponytail and is flying all over my head in wavy wisps. My whole body is swaggering around like an inebriated drunk. I'm hanging on for dear life onto anything that can support my weight. I know what I'm doing is completely ridiculous. This is insane. But I just can't sit back and do nothing. I just can't. The blustering, unflagging wind jostles me with cruel, dogged shoves, like an abusive, aggressive partner. I manage to crawl on my hands and knees, clinging to the grass with all my might, with the light of my torch guiding the way, on my hands and knees. I seem to have greater stability, I find, in manoeuvring myself across the turf, like an oversized, wiggling worm.
The dark has joined forces with the wind tonight. Two powerful aggressors determined to wreak their vengeance on the wedding guests, as if someone in our party has stored up a plethora of bad karma for themselves. The karma is now acting out into our reality, and we're all on the receiving end of it.
It would seem that the moon is an evanescent guest in the sky tonight, rather than a familiar good old friend, as she has decided to abandon the bad company of the cantankerous wind. And who can blame her for that? She is barely visible tonight. The glittering stars that always accompany her seem indeterminate, as if they had burrowed beneath the sky to conceal their glittering faces. The sky seems to have become dense, cloying, thick, while the wind whips, howls, screams in her disdainful belligerence. I am not discouraged. I have to find the bride. Where is she? I crawl with a fast speediness, as quickly as I possibly can, clawing at the ground with my nails and hands. But then in a moment, the wind sweeps me up in a pair of bullishly commanding hands, as if I'm as light as a feather. I wrestle against her tirelessly, but it's a losing battle, one that I will not win. She carries me far away from the marquee and drops me down on the ground. I found myself dangling over a precarious rocky ledge that is about 70 feet away from the Georgian house. But let's just say 70 feet is like an island away in a storm like this. And if I don't hold on to this rock for dear life, I could go sliding to the bottom of this cliff face to my death. I realize my own vulnerability, but I steady myself carefully, with one hand very firmly embedded on the rock, and another with the light of my torch, which miraculously, against all odds, was not blown away. My torchlight casts its flickering beams across the beach and the ocean. Then I hear a scream. Shivers begin to claw down my spine. The light of my torch can see a body, bobbing up and down in the capricious ocean waves. It's the bride. Oh my God, it's the bride! I watch in bated breath, my hopes dashed, as the courageous young woman is wrestling with the feverishly choppy waves that are fighting back, sweeping her further and further and further out to sea. This is a losing battle. It's impossible to win. My heart sinks. The bride is not going to make it to shore. There is no way I can help her. I'm clinging to these rocks myself for dear life, like a barnacle, feeling hopelessly defeated, as I know trying to save the bride will only result in my own imminent demise. For if I rose to my feet, even if I was very cautious about it, I would almost certainly be thrown off the slippery cliff. The wind's impetuous hands would literally have no mercy on me, and I would find myself joining the bride in the frantically turbulent, acquiescent current. Then there would be 2 deceased bodies washed to shore in the morning, submerged in seaweed. One of them will be mine. The woman is shrieking. Her voice is high-pitched, echoing across the ocean like a foghorn on a ghost ship, as everything tonight has an outer-worldly ambience about it. The bride is not giving up, without a fight. She's got spunk and tenacity. I'll certainly give her that. She's clinging on to hope with all her might, even when hope has spurned her and dismissed her cries. The light of my torch discerns something else. What is that? What on earth is that? At first it seems like a great big blob of black. Then a giant, dark, vertical humanoid figure appears quite suddenly, like a flash of light, through the foggy haze. And whoever he is, or she, it's not intimidated or browbeaten by this storm, not affected by its whipping current in the slightest, for it would take much more to subdue a creature of such statuesque proportions that, rather like a redwood tree, can stand up indomitably, stoically against nature's wrath. This dark, ambiguous silhouette moves stealthily through the wind like an untroubled, robust army vehicle that can overcome anything without any trouble, that can drive through any life-threatening situation. With a nonchalant air of longanimous indifference, the unflappable creature is gracefully, literally floating towards the sounds of the woman's frantic screams. As I watch in confounded astonishment at what is unfolding before my very eyes, I'm rather reminded of the movie Chariots of Fire. The phenomenal music soundtrack when Harold Abrahams and Eric Liddell raced for gold in 1924 Olympics, as there's such a purposeful grace in the creature's stride and the way he both coordinates his arms and leg movements together. It is musical to watch. But what the heck is this creature? I notice the shape of the head pivots to a conspicuous, rather pronounced point. The shoulders are massive, and the graceful, thick, heavily muscular legs seem to float, while his cushioned large feet glide through the soft beach sand, leaving behind a long vertical trail of deep impressions. The feet of a giant. Then this huge gargantuan being, whatever in God's name he actually is, dives into the water, swimming towards the terrified woman. And when he reaches her side, she seems to almost fight back, as she grips onto him for dear life, and would be dragging him under the water in her panic, if he wasn't so gargantuan, both in girth, weight, and strength. The creature holds the bride very gently in his overlong, powerful arms, with a rigid, resolute, very powerful strength, and then with a fluent grace, adroit dexterity, complemented by a smooth, fluid elegance, he freewheels his Herculean-sized body through the choppy waves that bite against his long, flowing, dark, silky hair, to the shoreline. He's using sweeping movements to anchor himself through the water as he swims, rather reminding me of a great fish. He's a natural in the water. The angry, uncompromising, unyielding waves, magnified furthermore by the feisty wind, attack the two bodies in defiance, like soldiers fighting a losing battle, knowing they've been defeated by the enemy. But even so they refuse to give up their vicious assault, as the flogging wind bangs against them. The powerful, strong, lofty creature swims to the shoreline like a swimming champion, with an effortless ease against a tumultuous, strapping current that knows no mercy, or magnanimous consideration for that matter. The creature's dark hair is now soaked to the skin, water clinging to his body like wet hair on a shaggy dog's coat, where cracks of grey skin beneath the dense finery of his silken black hair reveal the sculptural definitions of a muscle tone that most men would aspire to have on a wish list, that's for sure. Soon he is standing on the beach, like a tall, vertical, imposing tree, with the figure of the bride almost passed out from sheer exhaustion, cradled in his arms. Her head is swept right back. The tousles of her long hair cling to her head in ringlets, while her drenched wedding dress, what is left of it, that is all but a limp, rather glamorous shirt, clinging modestly to her upper torso. As I cling to the rocks, I'm flooded by relief. The bride has been rescued. But I'm astonished and befuddled by this enigmatic, idiosyncratic creature. What on earth is it? I focus the light of my torch on the creature more carefully, who, like a knight in shining armour, has delivered the bride from a watery grave. It is then the head of the creature looks directly up at me. Clinging to the rocks he can see that I am, and his yellow eyes meet mine. It is then that recognition flows through my body, as the pages of my mind go flashing back to a programme I'd watched on television an age ago, called Finding Bigfoot, I believe it was. I'm now flooded with an immense shame, as I had no respect for any people on that programme, apart from the red-headed woman Renee, who handled every Bigfoot encounter with a healthy scepticism and scant regard. I had laughed at these people, thinking they were grossly naive to believe in such preposterous imaginings, but now it hits me like a brick to the head. I was the naive one among them, not them. Oh my God, this creature is definitely a Bigfoot. There is no doubt about this in my mind. He's watching me with his wide golden eyes, and the eloquent, crisp words, "I'm coming to get you in a moment," enter my head. "Stay there, young girl. Don't you dare move. Not safe." What the heck? I think, befuddled. Did that creature actually just talk to me? There's no doubt he did. Is he coming to get me too? Oh, I hope so, for right now as the wind attacks me, it's punneling through my clothes, it's leathering me with a birch-like whip of vicious lashes. I can take no more, for an exhaustion has consumed me. The energy has been evacuated from me, drained away like water from a sink, and more than anything else I want to loosen my grip, let go, relax, give up, But if I do, even for a brief second, I'll be vanquished by this wind that will wallop me against the rocks, ambushing me from every side. So I will be flung into her powerful arms, tossed into the ocean, swept out to sea, and drowned under the waves, only to become a year later another mannequin-like body, lying on a sandy beach, tangled up in seaweed, vomited out by the sea herself at high tide. I'll possibly be found by a couple of 10-year-old boys, I imagine, who'll poke my body with a piece of birch to check if I'm made of flesh or plastic, if I'm alive or dead. At first they will squirm, with a disgusted, revulsed inquisitiveness that must be investigated. Is that what little boys do all the time, do they not? At that impressionable young age, investigate, prospect, forage, winnow, rummage, explore. Ostensibly, upon realizing I'm a corpse, they will stare at each other in abject horror, with eyes growing as wide as saucers. Then, remembering their voices, they will scream at the top of their lungs as they race back home, crumbling beneath their exhausted little legs to tell their parents about what a gruesome, horrifying, unsightly form they found regurgitated by the ocean, washed up this morning. People will gather around my body in droves, as if studying some strange idiosyncratic fish washed up to shore, a mermaid perhaps, with legs instead of fins. They'll toss and shake their wary heads.
"Well, what was she thinking?"
they'll say to each other.
"Why would a young, intelligent woman like this, with her whole life ahead of her, dice with death so recklessly? Everyone knows the weather last night was ruthlessly avenging, and yet despite this she embraced it like a wizened old friend. What was she thinking? Had she lost leave of her senses? Was she inebriated? Intoxicated? High on drugs, perhaps? Or positively insane, maybe? Worse still, was she of sober mind? And still did this? The latter would be very difficult to digest or assimilate. It would be easier to assume that this irrational, daredevil behaviour was a result of a drunken insanity. I mean, she was asking for trouble, was she not? Almost begging for the spirit of death to steal her away to pastures green that undulate in the clouds of the heavenlies above us.
I can almost hear the pity in their voices, as if they can't decide whether to pity my blind ignorance, incredulous naivety, brazen foolishness, or just a dreadful spate of an inauspicious, serendipitous bad luck. Like me, those boys won't ever forget, even with the passing years. The memory of my deceased body will haunt their darkest nightmares, torment their waking moments, and flickering memories that burn on the wicks of their imaginations, becoming one with their DNA, for they will absorb the horror of what they've seen, like a beverage that soon becomes consumed by the cells of our body, and becomes part of us, as anything we imbibe naturally does. My mind is encouraging me to keep positive, to hold on a little longer, just a little longer, just a little longer. I give myself a stern pep talk, reminding myself of what I have to live for, about my beautiful husband, the special people that I love in my life, my mother and dad, my sister. I think about the movie scene I've just created in my mind. Do I really want that scenario to unfold? Absolutely not. I'm reminded of the Bigfoot's words that sang into my head like a joyful church bell. Well, were they just hopeful ramblings of an overactive imagination on my part, and not a voice from him at all? Even if it was my mind teasing me and conjuring up words that were not my own to encourage me to hold on for a little longer, one thing I do know, that Bigfoot definitely saw me. If he rescued the bride, delivering her from harm's way, will he not do the same for me too? Surely he knows I'm not clinging to the rocks for my own pleasure. No one would be out here in the storm for the sheer fun of it. Would they? Never. Every guest in that marquee is cowering. Grown men are shrinking into the shadows of that canvas, ashamed of their own terror, coming to grips with their own mortality, like people on an aeroplane on realizing that the plane is going to crash in minutes. The Bigfoot knows I'm in perilous danger,
for the ferociousness of this cruel wind is unrelenting in its spiteful tenacity. I owe it to myself, and to all those I love, to get through this tempestuous ordeal. But I need to calm the storm of my doubt that is brewing in my mind, which by the looks of things is even more treacherous than this physical storm that is outside of me. The only thing that can let me down right now is myself. I close my eyes tightly, screaming out to God for his compassion and mercy, negotiating with him a plethora of promises that I do intend to keep. I promise you I intend to keep them. God, I'll be more loving, I cry out in my mind. I'll be a kinder person, much more patient, more tolerant, less judgmental. I'll go to church every Sunday. I promise you I will. I will read the Bible much more. I will confess my sins more regularly, of which I know that there are many. I'll buy my nephew the remote control plane he asked for last Christmas that I refused him so ungraciously. I'll take my mother out more often to the nail salon for a manicure, followed by a relaxing Thai massage. Then I will spoil her with a touch of shopping. I promise you I will. I'll buy her the dress she pointed out to me in the shop window more recently, that I pretended not to see, because of its blazing $1,000 price tag that very nearly gave me a coronary on the spot. I won't be jealous of my sister any more for being so much better at playing cards than me. I hate how she's always so damned good at cards and wins every single time. And she looks thrilled about it too. But God, next time she wins, instead of inwardly scowling, while wearing a fake smile on my sister's behalf, in the guise that I'm pleased for her, when inwardly I'm actually squirming, as I bite my inside cheek and pretend all is well with the world. I'll genuinely try to be happy for her, God. I really will. I will. I'll hug her with delight, admit she's a pro, compliment her lavishly for her undisputable skill. And you know, God, that's exceedingly hard for me to have to do. And when my sister taunts me by telling me her husband is whisking her to Paris for a 3-week holiday yet again, I mean, how many times does she have to go to Paris? Oh, and why does her wealthy husband whisk her all over the globe to all these exciting exotic locations, as his wealth is literally dripping out of his sweat? I'm stuck here at the Oregon coast. Not that I'm complaining, God. I love it here. But I will try and be happy for her. You see, God, I'm grateful just to be here, alive in one piece, with a new morning to hopefully embrace. I promise you, God, I'll try my level best to defeat my battles with the green-eyed monster, of which there are many that I need to overcome. Ah, they're a perpetual struggle, I admit they are. As I cling to the rock face, with my sweating fingers almost losing their grip, as the rock, like a perfidious skating rink, is now becoming increasingly slippery, like an eel. Its glassy, lubricated surface is wheedling my fingers to slide precariously all over the place, making me all too well aware that if I let go, I'm not going to make it. I know I'll slip down the slope like a children's slide, with the blustering persuasions of the backstabbing gale-force winds that will doubtless vindictively throw me into the mutinous waters, to be prescriptively reprimanded by the acrimonious authority and chastisement of the ocean waves themselves. My negotiation with God steps up a notch or two, becoming so much more intense. God, you need me, I cry out in my mind. You definitely need me, God. I try to conjure up a list of reasons why someone omnipotent like God could possibly need me. I can't think of any good reasons, but I'm going to have to think fast and quick. Why does God need me? Believe me, I'm thinking hard and fast. I've got no time to lose. Time is of the essence. Now is the time to hard sell myself to God like never before. I'll stop at nothing to persuade him that I still have a job to do on the earth plane, that I'm invaluable to him in every conceivable way. God, you need me. Brides need me. They need my sagacious advice and instruction. My mother needs me. My husband needs me. I know a lot about weddings. Invaluable stuff, God. I help the brides on the most challenging days of their lives. Without me, God, they definitely fall apart. Of course, I don't really believe this is true for a moment, but hopefully God will be persuaded by this compelling argument that I have brought to his attention so eloquently. I hope I was persuasive enough.
I'm furiously thinking about 101 more reasons why God needs me, when quite suddenly a huge pair of arms thrusts me off the hardened, slick, lubricous, very slippery rock face and throws me over his shoulders. I'm almost crying with relief. I feel as if I can let go finally, release my inhibitions, breathe again, relax. Oh my God, I'm being saved. Maybe God brought into my last lion, hook, line and sinker, I hope, that brides would fall apart without me. That must have been the lion that clinched the deal with God. Thank God for that. The wind wails and screams. Her ugliness intensifies when she sees one of her victims has been spared and rescued, which she was hoping to devour for herself, sacrificing to the ocean waves as a magnanimous gift. But not any more. I've been delivered from her perilous clutches by the merciful grace of a Bigfoot. If you had told me a day earlier that a Bigfoot would rescue me, and the bride from a perilous storm, I would never have believed you. Not even for a moment. I would probably think you had overindulged on psychedelic hallucinatory effects of the magic mushrooms that they often talk about. But what is happening to me now, as the creature holds me down with his overlarge hands, is real. Very real. And I'm not making any of this up, as surreal as this may seem to anyone listening to my story. Indeed, every aspect of this night has been dappled with a surreal aura and ambience from the rising tempestuous storm, the cowering guests, the murdered red velvet cake, and the rescuing of me and the bride. If I live through this night, I will confess this is indeed quite some story, a story I shall never forget. Will it change my life? I'm yet to see. I hope it will change me in a good and positive way. We could all do with being chiselled and shaped into becoming better people. The best of what we were preordained to be. A better version of ourselves. The Bigfoot smells magnificent, of sea salt, earth, and of pine. His glistening coat is wet from the damp sea, but as his long hair begins to dry, it bounces up in silken waves. The wind beats against his body, but the Bigfoot doesn't flinch. Like a powerful Californian redwood tree, he resolutely stands his ground, refusing to pander to the childish moaning whims of the wind. It would seem nothing can get this stoic, majestical, powerful creature down. Not for a moment. But then standing up at 9 foot tall, and easily over 800 pounds, this creature cannot be trifled with. It is with effortless ease he glides directly towards the Georgian property that is not only my wedding venue, but also my home. And as we draw ever closer, my heart warms considerably. It's the same feeling you get when you've been away from home for a very long time, and you return realizing that no matter how great your holiday was, at the end of the day, there really is no place like home. It was a very familiar, joyous feeling that aligned the back of my eyes with the dew of my own tears. I know I've only been away from the property for hours, but it feels more like months, weeks, even years. In the dusky twilight, my Georgian mansion looks like a dark cardboard cutout. The Bigfoot presses his sturdy foot against the ornate white front door, with its gleaming gold knocker, and swings it open with a push. The door slams behind him with a loud bang caused by the wind, as he finally enters the passageway. I say nothing as the Bigfoot head swings to the left and right, as he negotiates his way through the house, and then he places me on a sofa in the living room, opposite the sleeping form of the bride lying across the other sofa. She's in a deep sleep. Her snores echo across the high ceilings of my home. I notice the Bigfoot has not only covered her body with a throw, but with a plethora of scatter cushions as well, to keep her lovely and warm, because there is now a pronounced chill in the air. And then he quickly glances around the room with wide eyes, scanning the furnished landscape. Then he finds another loose throw, scattered over a recliner, which he covers me with a velvety blanket, along with a plethora of scatter cushions he finds lying around. I feel so much warmer. The relief of being away from the biting wind is immense. There are no words to express my gratitude. He grunts at me, saying something to me in a very strange, enigmatic language that sounds like Umana sulunuto boyanda bulawanao. The yellow eyes of his human-like face glance down at me, and they meet mine. No words come out of my mouth in exchange, for I am truly spent. completely exhausted and debilitated by the challenging duties the night offloaded on me, that I did not willingly undertake, but I did them anyway. "Thank you," I whispered to him in my mind. "Thank you for saving me." By the reaction in his eyes, I know he has heard my thanks. I swear he smiles at me, as the corner of his lips twitch upwards, and his yellow eyes are bespeckled with merriment. I hear the words in my head. "You were meant to be saved. A good apple should always be rescued, and not left for the pigs to eat. I'm glad I could help." He turned around and glided through the house, and the bang of the front door could be heard slamming behind him. In a trice I drifted off to a deep sleep, and it was only in the morning that both me and the bride were awoken to crowds of jubilant wedding guests gathering around us in delight, crying out jubilantly, "They're alive! They're alive! Oh my God, they're alive!" My husband and the groom were naturally overjoyed to find us alive. They had feared the very worst. There is a happy celebratory atmosphere among everyone as the storm died down in the early hours of the morning. During that terrifying, bleak ordeal, the guests had gathered together, under the tables, entertaining each other with stories all night that lightened the mood and lifted people's spirits. As one of the guests was to say, "The wedding night changed my life, made me aware of my own mortality." It would seem that wedding night changed the lives of so many. People gave up jobs they loathed. Unmarried people sought meaningful relationships. And even the bride herself, who had abandoned 2 marriages at the speed of light, settled down to her marriage very happily with her husband. And as far as I know, she's still very happily married to the same man. I asked her if she remembered her rescue from the water. All she could say was that a great big angel with big, yellow, beautiful eyes rescued her that night. As for me, not even my husband knows about my rescuer, or rescue, at the hands of a Bigfoot. I don't know how to explain this to you, but some things in your life are so deeply intimate, almost like something that you would only share with God himself. This is one of those experiences for me. So you may ask why I'm sharing it with you in this anonymous forum, because only good can come from my sharing, and I want you to know there are angels living among us, and many of them are of the hairy kind. So there you are. That's my story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, Enid could hear the loud, tentative rapping at the front door. And let's just say she was hoping that her friend Bridget would make the long, arduous journey down the long, sweeping oakwood staircase to answer the door for her. Could she not just pretend that she hadn't heard it? Bridget would be forced to get up on her account, which would certainly spare her a whole lot of grievous trouble. For getting out of bed for Enid had become a laborious, hazardous, painful mission. She could hear Bridget groaning in the room next door to hers. "Enid, get your lazy butt out of bed, will you? Answer the door, for goodness sake. It's your turn tonight. It's your turn to attend to the front door. Or have you conveniently forgotten that you're on duty tonight?" She squeezed her eyes tightly. She wanted Bridget's ear-splitting, badgering, somewhat shrieking voice to go away. Please go away. Please go away. That annoying woman could really get on your tits. She had the kind of searing voice that could cut through bone, marrow and sinew, and was not easy on the ears, especially late in the night or very early in the morning, when she could at best be compared to an infuriating bedside alarm, or at worst an ambulance siren, screaming and shrieking and wailing through the streets. She burrowed her silvery head of hair deeply into her pillow. She could pretend to be asleep for another 15 seconds, could she not? Then maybe, just maybe, her friend Bridget would show just a teensy-weensy bit of compassion for her on just one day in her miserable life, and answer the front door on her behalf, as a selfless favour or a kindly gesture. Who was she kidding? In the 7 years they'd worked together, in this clandestine location for battered women, the victims from abusive relationships, never once, when Enid was on duty, had Bridget ever answered the door for her, except during that time when she had that fortuitous bout of pneumonia, which had been a close call with death. Even the doctors had been amazed that she'd pulled through, but Enid was sure she knew what it was like to die, She remembered she had so nearly just slipped away, like a light feather on the wind, and the experience had been surprisingly pleasant, so Enid no longer feared death, describing it as not altogether an unpleasant feeling. Let's just say that Bridget, who was 10 years her junior, had a back as straight as a pencil, a slender body that moved with a buoyant grace, so she had no comprehension whatsoever of what Enid went through every time she climbed out of bed. So how could she even begin to remotely appreciate what it was like to live in a battered, uncooperative body that had almost certainly seen better days? The knocking on the front door persisted, while the piercing loud crescendo of Bridget's voice reached fever pitch, causing the floorboards in Enid's room to groan, and the drinking glass on her bedside table to rattle precariously, almost as if any second it might just crack and break.
"What the hell is wrong with you, Enid? Get the bloody door, will you?"
If it proved anything, Enid thought privately to herself with a somewhat smug satisfaction, Bridget had quite some voice on her. Too bad it hadn't been put to better use, like being moulded into being an opera singer instead of becoming like an obnoxious roaring siren in the middle of the night, used skillfully to harass Enid when it was her turn to answer the door, and reluctantly get out of bed. It had been an unlikely, improbable friendship between both Bridget and Enid, born out of unfortunate circumstances that had brought the two women serendipitously together, who would otherwise have never crossed paths. Suffice to say, Bridget had got to an explosive place in her life where she'd actually ended up beating her husband over the head. It was lucky he had survived the ordeal, but let's just say it had been a close call. Both women knew what it was like to live in fear every day of their lives. They received a hand financially every year for their enterprising work from charities that support the victims of marital abuse. Both Bridget and Enid were like close sisters, but there were things about each other that niggled them both, as is often the case with people working tightly together, in a confined living space, under the same roof. Bridget found Enid to be a bit slow and unsteady on her feet, believing Enid to have an inclination towards laziness, while Enid thought that Bridget was a little bossy, and sometimes as rigid as some of her rickety bones that simply refused to bend. Enid got out of bed.
"Enid! Enid! Get out of bed, you lazy cow, will you? You're on duty tonight,"
came Bridget's voice screeching through the night.
"There's someone at the front door, and I'm not going to answer it for you. You're on duty. You do it. And don't you pretend to be sleeping. I'm not going to buy into any of your sneaky tricks. I wasn't born yesterday, you know."
Enid briefly glances at the digital alarm clock on her bedside table. It's 3 o'clock. You've got to be kidding me. This was a godless, unforgiving hour of the morning. All right, Bridget," she calls out. "Keep your knickers on, as from where I'm standing they're definitely falling off. I'm getting up, but we can't all be as sprightly as you," she says, with a twinge of sarcasm in her voice. Enid grudgingly rises up on her elbow, pushing herself up in an upright position, while undertaking the taxing mission of climbing out of bed, a job not for the faint-hearted, as at her advancing age the hands of the ticking biological clock are moving steadily towards the late 70s, early 80s. When she moved her body, it creaked and groaned like a rickety piece of furniture that had long passed its best, balancing precariously on 4 legs, but looked as if in any minute it might just buckle over, disintegrate, collapse and crumble, with a little more wear and tear, that is. It was like that for Enid, but she never even verbally articulated to her friend how dilapidated she felt her body had become. Somehow such self-pity seemed in poor taste, especially living among women whose physical bodies had been sometimes knocked into a pulp and scrambled. So these young women knew all about pain. So who was she to grumble about her aging aches? Over the years, Enid's body had thickened substantially. She had gained unsightly weight in places that were resistant to any kind of diet, as the weight clung to her like a limpet, refusing to budge. Her aching joints had stiffened and had become obstreperously unyielding, while her unbending, tiresome bones were like peanut brittle, likely to snap at any given moment. It didn't help, of course, that the assiduous inflammation of her gouty arthritis meant that she was well acquainted with the unrelenting discomfort that tended to accumulate in her feet and ankles, causing an obnoxious swelling and a dogged, tenacious burning sensation that would shoot through her knees. Enid winced out in pain as a throbbing ache went whizzing up her arms, as she pushed her arm through the thin faded fabric of her age-old overwashed dressing gown, which had clearly been through too many cycles in the washing machine over the years and had become sympathetic to Enid's plight, as it too had become limp like a dish rag. She reluctantly tied the cord of the dressing gown over her extended middle, while she slipped her puffy feet into a pair of sheepskin slippers that left deep indentations of her foot impressions in the soles. Her puffy toes ached as the slippers tightened around her swollen feet. The persistent banging of the front door started up all over again. The furious rapping became almost belligerent, while Enid's bladder stung with fullness. She needed to pee. She always needed to pee. She was torn between a rock and a hard place, and knew that she would be wise to overlook her ablutions for now, as whoever was at the front door seemed hell-bent on getting inside the house. So she better get down the stairs as quickly as she could to answer that door right away. Who was at that door? They seemed desperate to get in. Enid manoeuvred her square-shaped body as quickly as she could, like an old piece of reluctant furniture being dragged across the floor. Her body ached and groaned, every bone heaving with the stress of navigating her cumbersome shape like a gargantuan ocean liner through a narrow waterway. She grabbed hold of the wooden railing, easing her form down one step at a time, so that each foot landed safely on the Persian runner that glided gracefully down the central staircase in this old Queen Anne-style home. She could hear Bridget's loud voice again, blazing through the silence. "Get a move on, will you, Enid? There's someone at the bloody door!" Enid breathed a huge sigh of relief and self-congratulation when she'd reached the bottom step. The exertion of moving so speedily meant her heart was now thundering in her chest, almost as if she'd run a marathon. Her breathing was raspy and disjointed, but she felt triumphant about getting down the staircase as quickly as she had done so. Enid ambled through the narrow passageway towards the front door, her wilful, truculent, stiff bones having warmed up ever so slightly, her mobility less jarring, almost as if her joints had suddenly received a much-needed oiling. "I'm coming! I'm coming!" she called. Enid peers through the peephole in the door. It's always sagacious to check through the front door, for it was always possible that a confrontational boyfriend or a pugnacious husband might actually uncover the location of their safe house that had happened once before with one of their residents, whose husband had hired a private detective to find his wife's whereabouts. So you could never be sure who was on the other side of the door, and you did have to check. It's dark outside, but even Enid's waning eyesight is not as sharp as it used to be. But she still can distinguish the non-threatening slender silhouette of a young woman standing in the doorway, looking furtively over her shoulders, as if half expecting something to pounce on her from out of the dark shadows. She's obviously eager to get inside the house. Enid knows full well how skittish and frightened abused women can actually be. No different to an abused animal that's been badly treated by its owner, that runs and hides in the dark corner, its body trembling, its dark eyes filled with terror. Enid had found women were no different to domesticated pets when they were abused. She pulls back the chain, turns the key in the lock, and opens the door. In seconds her own physical discomfort flees from her like a balloon on the wind when she gasps in horror at the sorry sight that greets her eyes. She has never become conditioned over the years, when she's been doing this work, to some of the gruesome sights she sees regularly, of women being beaten up so badly, like a road map of black bruises, with tributaries of dried blood everywhere. This young woman's bloody face is certainly not easy on the eyes. Enid can see dry blood gathered around her nostrils from a rather nasty nosebleed. Some of it is crumbling away. It looks as if this poor girl has been punched in the face, while there is some superficial bleeding in the hairline, but luckily the scalp looks to be all right. Enid notices that once, where the girl boasted what she assumes was a perfectly symmetrical nose, possesses a defined kink, an indelible sign of a broken nose, which she possibly incurred as a result of physical abuse. Of course, nothing ever surprises Enid these days. She's certainly seen it all. The graphic horrors of the fairer sex, so unkindly subjected to all manners of physical, emotional and mental abuse. But one never really acclimatizes to it. Enid quickly scrutinises the woman in the doorway, giving her a once-over, like the EMTs do when examining a patient, where they have to make a quick, speedy assessment. Enid discerns the girl is thin and emaciated. She looks like she's missed out on far too many healthy meals, but with sunken, hollow cheekbones, dark circles under her red eyes, and a splattering of blood on her yellow and white cotton dress, which she is wearing with a bright yellow cardigan, she really does look like a victim of war. The woman is trembling, as if she's freezing cold, but it's a warm night. She whimpers like a frightened dog as she looks at Enid through red eyes, which Enid privately suspect have succumbed to far too many tears of late.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you up, but I was scared. I thought he could be following me, she said, her head glancing over her shoulders again to examine the streets. But this is a very quiet New York green leafy neighbourhood, and it's very, very still. There's certainly no curtains twitching in the neighbouring houses from curious inquisitive neighbours, of which, of course, there are many. But even a snooping busybody finally draws a line at spying on their neighbours at about 3 o'clock in the morning. The only shadows are from the silvery light of the moon, dancing through the dark clouds, filtering across the asphalt road, along with the accompanying reflective light from the vintage street lamps. Everything is quiet. Even the young woman seems reasonably satisfied that she is indeed safe, as her beady, reddened eyes scan the entire street like a savvy bird of prey. She believes now, I think, that there isn't a solitary soul in sight, and the quietness of the morning remains completely undisturbed. I am at the right place, am I not? This is the White Dove safe house, is it? Enid nods, gesturing kindly for the woman to come in, putting a reassuring hand on her back and guiding her along the passageway. Someone gave me your card a while ago. I think it was a year ago, actually. She was a kind nurse who guessed I'd been beaten up by my husband when I was in hospital for a broken arm. I've always kept the card in my purse, hoping that I would never need to use it. But I can't take it anymore. I've just had enough. Tonight was the final straw. I've reached breaking point. If I ever go back to him, there'll be nothing left of me. All I will be is the muck on his shoe. That's what it's come to of late. Don't you worry, young lady. You've come to the right place, and you're not alone. There are 12 girls in this house just like you, staying here at the White Dove house, all with horror stories not unlike your own. They too reached a breaking point in their life, which is why they're here. And there's always room at the inn, as they say, for another bird with a broken wing. Follow me, says Enid, directing the young lady into the house, leading her directly into the cosy-looking kitchen, where she beckons to the young girl with an outstretched arm to please take a seat. Let's make you a nice hot cup of tea, shall we? Enid knows full well that the ritual of making tea, even at 3 o'clock in the morning, has a remarkable stabilising effect on victims of trauma. She's seen it for herself. The young woman sits at the long wooden oak table in the French-style provincial-looking kitchen that looks more like something you'd find in the south of France, with that rustic, rather charming appeal. The stone flooring, the wooden dresser that's piled high with blue and white china, a solid wooden trolley covered with spices, a large sideboard with underlying drawers and shelves, a huge fitted sink, a large red range oven. There are long, colourful, wholesome ribbons of glistening chilies and white garlic bulbs bundled together in clusters, along with a plethora of sparkling pans that gleam so very brightly that you can actually see your reflection in them. They're strategically hanging above the range on a low ceiling that is easily accessible to the cook. Enid places the bright red kettle onto the sturdy gas hob, and before long the kitchen is filled with a strangely reassuring whistling sound of the kettle singing. The water has finally boiled.
Enid skilfully removes the kettle from the hob and pours hot water over the English breakfast tea bags, bringing them over to the table. She arranges 2 teacups and saucers and pours a splotch of milk into the tea. The milk seems to fold into the tea on its own. She pushes a cup over to the young girl, who clutches the teacup gratefully in her hands, rather like a hot water bottle. "Sugar?" asks Enid. "It might actually be a good idea for you. As my good old mother used to say, it's certainly the best remedy for shock. It works every time." The young woman reaches out for a teaspoon and piles 3 heaped teaspoons into her cup of tea, and then she stirs it around and around and around, as if the movement of stirring is somehow very therapeutic. "How about something to eat?" asks Enid. "I could rustle you up a sandwich. I've got cheese and ham slices in the refrigerator. I also have Nutella chocolate spread, which the ladies here love on toast. The ladies in this house, let's just say they love chocolate. But then so does my waistline," she teases, patting her extended girth with a wary resignation, which was supposed to be funny. But the young girl isn't really laughing. "Chocolate spread on toast," said the girl. I like the sound of that. I can never say no to chocolate." The young girl sips her tea as Enid pulls out the bread from a bag and pops 2 slices into the red Kenwood toaster until the browned toast pops up. Enid throws the warm toast onto a plate and saturates the crispy toast with butter and chocolate spread, which melts when it embraces the warm bread. Even this unlikely ritual brings a measure of comfort to the young woman, who watches her in an almost meditative state, without saying a single word. And when Enid hands her the plate, she eagerly bites into the chocolate-covered toast with large, hungry mouthfuls, as if she suddenly just realised how hungry she actually is. "My word, this is delicious. Thank you," she says. Enid smiles knowingly to herself. She's seen it all before, in the abused victims of wife-battering, who stay at White Dove House over and over again. Granted, sugar gets a bad rap these days, she thinks privately to herself. We're always told it's white poison. But Enid does not agree with this. She's seen how the sweetness of cane sugar has brought a downtrodden, desperate young woman out of her melancholia into a place of reflective meditation and tranquil calm. The young woman seems pleasantly tranquilized when moments before she was trembling like a frightened animal. Now she looks so much more serene, almost as if a sudden peace has washed over her, and the world doesn't seem quite so dreadful as it first appeared. "Would you like to tell me what led you to come to White Dove House? Unless you don't want to talk about it, of course, of which I quite understand. Some people aren't ready to talk, and sometimes they're never ready to talk. I know if my friend Bridget was up at the moment, the first thing she would do is to attend to the blood all over your face, washing it away carefully. But we do things differently, the two of us. I always believe talking is best, before we even clean the physical mess up." "It's always what's in here," says Enid, putting her hand over her heart, "that hurts the most. The fact that it's not physically bleeding doesn't make it any the less traumatic. Believe me, I know all about marital abuse. I was in an abusive marriage myself for over 15 long years, until one day I just couldn't take it anymore. I knew if I hung around for a moment longer with my husband, the next time he'd probably kill me, or I him. So I got out of that relationship before it was too late. The trouble was it crushed my self-esteem so badly. It took me a long while to ever regain my confidence and self-esteem. Of course I was young back then at the time, but I could find no peaceful sanctuary or safe haven for emotional support, or anyone to talk to who understood what I'd been through, which was why Bridget and I started up this White Dove's place. The girl regards Enid with wide eyes. Enid knows when she opens up about her abusive marriage that young women are much more willing to talk to her. It's like in her they have found a likely ally, someone who rarely comprehends and relates to their pain. "My name's Orlagh, Orlagh. What's your name? I apologise for not introducing myself to you earlier, but my emotions got the better of me, and when that happens, I just can't think straight." "Well, that's perfectly understandable in the circumstances." "Orlagh? Yes, I do like that name. Well, my name's Enid." "Nice! I think you look like an Enid. Tonight I just knew if I didn't get out of there, I'd probably never escape my man's clutches. He's been abusing me for a while now." "I'm sorry to hear that, Orlagh," says Enid sympathetically. How long has the abuse been going on for, if you don't mind my asking? Orlagh pauses for a moment. I'm not actually sure. He wasn't always like that, my husband. But I guess you could say fate dealt us some cruel blows. It was rather like the domino effect in our lives. When one thing went down, so did everything else. Believe it or not, Chancer used to be a really decent person, and I mean really decent. I would have never got involved with him otherwise, but he changed, and then he became very abusive. Do you know when the abuse started? Well, it was like he became so angry and belligerent with the world, you know. I mean, everything went wrong with his life. It was almost like the heavens had opened and throttled him with meteorites. I mean, I think everything escalated after his brother was beaten up to a pulp, after a drink in a bar, where he was found lying dead on the side of the road. You never get over that. Of course you don't. That's terrible. Anyway, after his brother's fortuitous death, upon whom the police were never able to solve, I might add, he kind of started to change. He'd punched the walls, claiming he hated this goddamned world and this miserable life of his. He went to work one day, and returned that evening to tell me he'd got fired, as he'd actually punched his boss. He punched his boss? Says Enid, reflecting over the words. Not possibly the wisest thing to do. Why did he do that? What I gleaned was he asked his boss for a pay rise. His boss told him that he needed to show him a little more productivity on the work front before his wages could be increased. At the time he was earning jolly good money, I might add. We were living in a relatively decent Manhattan neighbourhood, renting an upmarket apartment. She pauses for a moment, taking a deep breath. Things were jolly good back then, actually. Until his brother died, that seemed to just ignite the firework. It caused everything in our lives to explode. After that, Chancer, who's my husband, became so angry all the time. Everything would get him grievously upset. I found living with him a complete, total and utter nightmare. I quite literally had to walk on eggshells, as he'd lose it over the tiniest, craziest things, like if I brought back home the wrong brand of peanut butter. It was like he would almost have a coronary arrest, as if I'd brought a dangerous explosive into the house. He would become insanely irate. In a nutshell, I do think the day he got fired from work was quite literally the beginning of the end. You know, he actually broke his boss's nose and punched him so violently hard. It took 3 men to restrain him and to pull him off his own boss. Mr. Brothering, who is Chancer's boss, is a very good man. He refused to file any charges against Chancer, as he understood my husband was grieving, which was jolly decent of him in the circumstances, as a lesser man would not have been so forgiving. I understand that, says Enid, but no matter what you're going through, no matter how bad things get, there is no excuse for violence. Anyway, carry on. I don't want to interrupt the flow of your story. In my husband's industry, he couldn't find gainful employment anywhere, as word had got out about his altercation with his boss, and no one wants to hire someone who's beating up the boss or is physically violent. My husband sank into a deep depression and despair, because he couldn't find work, and he was far too proud to get menial work, like flipping burgers or working in a bar. No, he was too good for that, which was such a pity, as sometimes you just need to bite your lip and get on with it, as we all go through times in our lives when we have to do things we don't enjoy to survive. But not Chancer. He was too good for that. By this stage, anything I would say to him would get him started. I told him I was going to get a job as a waitress somewhere, because we had to pay our bills, and that went down like a lead balloon.
Over my dead body are you going to get a job as a waitress? Do you realise how humiliating that will look on me? No wife of mine is going to work, and that's final. Do you understand that?
Every word out of his mouth was F-U and bloody. I remember he slammed me against the wall so violently, but he pounded the wall with his fists. Luckily he hadn't hit me then, but he damaged the wall of our house, so we never got our deposit back to cover all the costs of the damage. Every wall was full of holes by the time we'd left the place. The abuse, of course, started later, when a work colleague of his told us we could stay in his trailer home on a plot of land, where he and his wife were going to build a craftsman home. At the time he was postponing the build for a couple of years to raise more finances for the project, as he wanted no expense to be spared during the build, and was waiting for some investments to come through for him to cover all the material costs. I believe he and his wife had brought the trailer home as a temporary on-site property while the build was in progress, so that they could observe the entire process, making absolutely certain that everything was done to perfection. Well, that was the general idea anyway. Well, I think Chancer was very lucky to have a friend like that, offering him free accommodation, reflects Enid. I imagine by then you had no money to support your previous more affluent lifestyle, am I right? Certainly you're right, and it wasn't good news moving into that trailer, let me tell you. It was conspicuously going down in the world for us, especially for Chancer, without wishing to sound snooty. I mean, we were used to our creature comforts by then, living in the lap of luxury in a sumptuous apartment. Then moving to a poky trailer home was hardly very pleasant. It wasn't bad, actually, for a trailer home. Don't get me wrong, it was in remarkably good condition, to be fair. A couple of bedrooms, a nice living room, electricity and running water. I mean, what more could you actually want? But Chancer was hit with the grim reality that we weren't going up in the world. He had always been ambitious and successful, but no one in his line of work wanted to hire him, as I was telling you. So his self-esteem plummeted. I think he felt as if he was on a sinking ship, upon which he had no control, and that he had failed me, and failed himself. So he began to abuse me. He'd beat me up and lash out at me, call me every name under the sun. It wasn't pretty, but I think beating me up made him feel a bit better about himself, as strange as that sounds. Why didn't you leave him, dear? Now, I'm not pointing an accusatory finger, I'm not. I was in exactly the same predicament as you. I also never left my husband. I postponed it all. I put up with the abuse, because underneath it all I felt so worthless, as if I deserved to be treated with such disdain. But no one deserves to be physically attacked, in their own home of all places. I don't really know. Love is a complicated thing, is it not? One is reluctant to let it go. I mean, Chancer had been so wonderful before his life hung around him in rags. But after he lost his job, he sank into a despairing depression. He began to drink an excess of beer. That was when he became rather abusive. I suppose I viewed him a little like a gardener examining a bedraggled plant that many might toss away and put on the scrap heap. But I was desirous to do everything to revive it, save it in any way I could, using rusty water, banana peels, new soil, planting it in a different location perhaps. But nothing ever worked. But you still do everything you can. You don't want to give up. You keep fighting because at the end of the day you care about that plant and you want it to pull through, however badly the odds are stacked against it. Well, that's how I felt about Chancer. Believe me, I do think I understand. So what happened this evening that made you decide that this was the final straw? Well, Chancer wanted to kill this most beautiful Bigfoot. This beautiful Bigfoot with his rifle. Believe me, he tried, but I wasn't going to let him do it. I physically hit him to stop him from doing such a nonsensical, outrageous thing. And then he turned his wrath on me. He began to beat me up. He was swearing at me. I truly didn't think I was going to make it. I thought that he was going to kill me. A Bigfoot? Says Enid. Is this a joke? Are those things real? It was hard to believe I'd loved Chancer once. Love can indeed be an enigmatic thing, where common sense may not always be engaged. I remember within days of meeting him, I thought he was the one for me. Everything about him made my heart flutter. Was this not how you were supposed to feel when you fell in love? A tingling electricity that filled you with a dewy excitement that brings the colour burning to your cheeks and a skip to your step. When I wasn't in his presence, I could think about nothing else but him, almost as if he was becoming an all-consuming obsession of mine that I couldn't live without, as if he was the yang to my yin. He'd swept me off my feet. I never thought I'd come down to earth, but let's just say when I did, it was with a big, mighty bang. That was not going to be a smooth or happy landing either. Chancer wasn't tall. He was about 5'7", confident and self-assured, with a cockiness I would later learn to despise. When I first met him, I found his assertiveness rather attractive and endearing. It complemented his audacious impertinence, but the very thing that I first loved about him soon became adulterated, polluted, soiled by a toxic anger that would soon invade his life like a rampant cancer. Chancer is what I would have described as slender, with a neat build, with muscles he had attained from drumming rather than in the gym, which made him streamlined and strong rather than bubbly. His head was serenaded with curly sweeps of silky brown hair that was cropped up in the middle of his head in a funky, upbeat hairstyle that gave him a cheeky, mischievous look, reflecting his innate sense of fun. His skin invited a warm olive glow on a perfectly symmetrical hairless face, which sometimes would be shadowed or dappled with a day-old stubble. His somewhat hooded brown hazel eyes were always alive with humour. When he asked me to marry him, I hadn't hesitated to say yes, as doubts about spending my entire life with him was not entertained, not even for a fleeting second. For indeed this dreamy, perfect gentleman, whom it seemed could do absolutely no wrong, treated me like a queen throughout our relationship, opening car doors for me, wining and dining me at some highly esteemed, illustrious restaurants in New York City, where we ate the most phenomenal food and drank the finest French champagne. Once as a surprise he whisked me off to stay at a posh hotel on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision for him to take me to the capital of romance, where he spoilt me rotten and brought me the most exclusive designer Louis Vuitton and Chanel handbags and Hermes scarves, while we were there, that is. I was so incredibly spoilt, and what girl doesn't enjoy being pampered once in a while? Let's just say even my girlfriends thought I'd certainly landed in the clover, with the exception, of course, of my parents, who begrudgingly smelt a rat from the very beginning. My father always used to say, "If something looks too good to be true, then it most likely, very definitely is." My father was a man that never held back his opinion. He described Chancer as like a fox in a chicken coop, as he believed there was a darker side to my husband's personality, a sly, manipulative side that had not yet been unveiled to me. My husband was 5 years older than me, and was successful in his job. But after his brother died, having been found kicked to the curb by a violent thug outside a bar, it was almost as if my husband had died with his brother. On the inauspicious, fateful night upon which the gnarled, tangled shoots of despair had been birthed, it was after this serendipitous event that our lives spiralled out of control. The waters of our relationship became muddied, so that instead of presenting solid, secure foundations, it became like a precarious, slippery slope. It would seem that grief lashed out at Chancer, like a belligerent bull terrier, punching him so hard in the guts, that like a wary wrestler who's been knocked onto the ground too many times, he finds it impossible to rise to his feet again, as if life had callously vanquished and wilfully defeated him. I watched him slipping and sliding down that slope of depression. I actively encouraged him to seek help with a counsellor, but after 2 sessions with a grief counsellor, he was convinced that the counselling had made him become even more aggrieved, rather than less. It was true, after the counselling, things did seem to take a drastic turn for the worse, almost fueling his rage, as if someone had suddenly tossed petrol on the red embers of his anger, which, much like a wildfire, was now completely out of control. I remember looking at my husband and thinking, this is not what I signed up for when I married you. I felt as if I'd been cheated, as if someone had shown me a glossy magazine brochure and said, this is what you're going to get when you marry Chancer. But the reality was very different. Had it all been a horrible, deceptive lie, false, manipulative advertising on Chancer's part, similar to what you see on deceptive social media sites, when people willfully post up such glamorous pictures online of themselves that sometimes don't even bear a remote resemblance to what they actually look like in real life, along with their seemingly perfect lives that can be persuasively impressive. But in the cruel, brutal light of day, the blazing brightness can unkindly show up the truth, revealing the hidden horrors that lie beneath, that you never discerned before, like glamorous wallpaper in a Victorian mansion that sneakily, rather clandestinely covers up all the cracks and craggy pits on a less than smooth surface to hide the truth. But slowly and surely the facade begins to blister and crack. You can see the grim reality that lurks beneath, which is a whole lot less pretty, which is what it's like for me with Chancer. I know they say until death do you part, but Chancer had become volatile and explosive, like a landmine that could potentially go off in any second, if you provoked, that is, or rubbed him up the wrong way. One subject that really irked him was what to do about our dwindling finances after Chancer had been sacked from attacking his boss during work hours. Of all things. One action that was creating the domino effect in our lives to almost certainly be unleashed. "I really need to get a job," I'd explained to him. "We can't remain in this luxury apartment without any income. Surely you know that."
"What did you say?"
says Chancer, thrusting his hand under my chin and throwing me violently against the wall. The first time he did this to me I was completely thrown off guard, and so shocked and bewildered that it was almost as if what was unfolding wasn't really happening, as my husband had never laid a hand on me before. "I said I need to find a job, Chancer. We can't possibly live on fresh air, can we?" My words compound his fury. They're not what he wants to hear. He punches the wall with his fists.
"You're not going to work. You understand that? You're not bloody going to work."
My voice is trembling. "Chancer, don't be so ridiculous and unreasonable. It's not like we actually have a choice in the matter. If we did, that would be different, but we don't. If we don't pay our rent, we'll be thrown out of the apartment. You don't want to do a menial job, and I get that, but someone needs to work. Or how on earth are we going to support ourselves? Now that you're not working, we cannot possibly afford the rent on this lavish apartment. We need to find modest accommodation." My words infuriate Chancer. He pounds my nose with his fists. The pain is excruciating. It feels as if my nose has been knocked off my face, as if it's broken. I clutch my fingers over my nose, looking at him through horrified eyes. "What have you done?" I can feel and taste the scarlet liquid streaming down my face. Chancer then punches me in my guts. I wince in agony. A dreadful pain sweeps over my stomach. I keel over on the floor in a crumpled heap and curl over in a fetus position. My nose is swilling blood all over the place, even dappling my clothes with its specks. I'm surprised how red my blood looks as it pools onto the wooden parquet floors in miniature crimson ponds. Finally, when I manage to stumble awkwardly to my feet, I challenge my husband. I'm not going to be a doormat for him. I'm not going to allow him to walk all over me with such disregard and to physically abuse me like this. Who on earth does he think he is? "Chancer, what the hell is wrong with you?" I scream out at him. "Why would you hit me like this? I think I've broken my nose. It's really hurting. You've really hurt me. You've never laid a hand on me before, and if you ever do so again, I'm out of here." Of course, Chancer apologised profusely, rather bashfully, I might add. But even I'm not foolish enough to stay with someone indefinitely if they don't apologise over a physical altercation that they actually caused. Chancer calmed the storm down, saying everything I needed to hear. Everything I wanted so desperately to believe. Needless to say, his reassuring, kind words were rather like a band-aid on a nasty cut, as it was only a matter of time before it was ripped away all over again. Chancer informed me he was just going through a rough time. That was all it was. That he had meant me no harm, and he didn't mean to lash out like that. And of course it would never ever happen again. By all accounts, those words were faint, ambiguous, rather obscure promises that never lasted. In truth, everything began to make my husband mad, no matter how trivial or minuscule. Even in the supermarket he had an altercation with the manager once, as the shop were out of his favourite brand of cookies. I mean, how juvenile is that? There was a slanging match that ensued. A few punches later there was blood all over the manager's nose. Because my husband had punched him there. My husband ended up being arrested. Slowly but surely, drip by drip, I began to become afraid of Chancer. When we moved to the countryside to stay in Louis Montgomery's trailer home near the town of Lake George, gateway to the southern Adirondack Mountains that lies in the upper regions of the Appalachian Valley, 4 hours' drive from Ottawa in Canada and about 3.5 hours away from New York City. It was then that things got significantly worse, as without a job my husband would literally while away the long lonely hours drinking beer and being inflamed by his own self-pity, whereupon he decided that the entire world had conspired against him, that no one could be trusted, especially not me. That was the funny thing. I must admit the large piece of land that Chance's friend had procured for the future building development of their lakefront home, that overlooked the exquisite views of Lake George, which boasted an array of charming little islands that you can reserve for overnight camping. Lake George is an oligotrophic lake, and the lake water is so crystal clear. I am told that the mountains surrounding Lake George create a watershed with the steep, small forested slopes that successfully manage to keep pollution at bay, and hence preserve the clarity of the water. The lake is annually stocked with landlocked salmon and naturally reproducing stocks of trout and bass, so fishing at the lake is rewarding, and there are some substantial size fish to be procured, if you're a good fisherman, that is. If our finances had not been so dire in the circumstances, and let's just say they were pitiful, staying in this exquisite location would have been incredibly special. Lake George was transfixingly beautiful. It quite literally took my breath away. I found myself feeling envious about Chance's friend, Louis Montgomery, living in this rural New York area, about to build his dream home here, in the not-too-distant future, overlooking such exquisite, mesmerizing views. I think even Chancer realized that his anger had quite literally robbed us of our future, possibly staying at the trailer and knowing how short-term and indefinite this arrangement was, only provoked his aggression, like someone poking an aggressive dog with a stick, I imagine. I think Chancer believed everyone in his firm was conspiring against him to stop him from ever working again. But nothing could have been further from the truth. But Chancer never saw it that way. Chancer had been popular in the workplace, loved by so many, who would have been delighted to see him getting back on his feet again. Mr. Brothering, his boss, had kindly assured him if he received anger management courses, he would almost certainly be welcomed back into the fold with open arms. "You are very talented and skilled, Chancer," he had told him generously. "Furthermore, everyone in the workplace is exceedingly fond of you, and you are genuinely missed by everyone. I don't bear any grudges about what you did, breaking my nose like that. I understand losing your brother was a devastating blow for you. You were naturally venting your anger. But I cannot receive you back into my employ until I'm fully satisfied from a professional point of view that you've gone through anger management and are able to control your temper. I hope you appreciate that I have a duty of care to all my staff that work under my employ, to protect them from any physical danger or altercations. I'm also not in a position to give you a glowing reference to other potential employers seeking to hire you. I would not be responsible if I did not mention the unfortunate altercation that led to your dismissal. Otherwise, I can give you a glowing reference, but this part of it I am going to have to reveal to them." Chancer was furious. "He wants me to get bloody anger management. Does he? Is that what he wants? And only then he'll consider recruiting me, when he's fully satisfied that I've adequately calmed down and that I don't impose a little threat to his staff. What an arrogant, pompous git! A real Philistine! Oh, he thinks he's such a big shot, does he not?" says Chancer churlishly, his feathers clearly more than a little ruffled, his jaw clenching tightly, his eyes glaring indignantly. "Well, you did break his nose like you did mine," I remind him. "Mr. Brothering has good reason to be on the fence about taking you back. I mean, he's right. He has a responsibility to his staff, does he not? Your anger that day, Chancer, it got completely out of control. But there is a way back. Mr. Brothering is making a way back for you." "You bloody little bitch! You spiteful cow! Whose side are you on?" says my husband, thrusting a fist violently into my belly, while the pain just pounds inside me. "Please don't, Chancer! You're hurting me! It really hurts! This is so sore! What are you doing?" "You bloody bitch! Whose bloody side are you on? Mine or Mr. Brothering's? Tell me that!" "Stop it, Chancer," I say, the salty tears spilling down my cheeks. "I'm always on your side. You know that. I'm only telling you the truth. You know Mr. Brotherings is trying to help you. People care about you. They want you to return to work. They really do. They've got your back." "You don't know what the F you're talking about, you dipstick.
You haven't got a bloody clue, have you? You've always been an airhead, always will be an airhead. Do you know why I'm not getting any work in my line of business? Do you know? It's that prick, Mr. Brothering. He's telling any future employees, oh, yes, Chance's very good at his job, but watch out, he might just punch you in the nose when you're not looking. That man is completely, deliberately sabotaging my chances of being employed again. It's like he's got all the power in his hands. Everyone is turning me away. Do you realise that? Everyone is turning me away. Even before I have an interview. Who would ever bloody hire me if they knew I had punched my boss in the nose? You're talking bull when you say he has my best interests at heart. The man wants to humiliate me, drag me down, destroy my good reputation.
Look, Chancer, please don't punch me for saying this, I say boldly, covering my stomach in self-defence, as I subconsciously mentally prepare for another cruel blow to come my way. Mr. Brotherings is absolutely right. He does have to warn other potential employers about what you did. He told you himself. If you went to anger management, all this could be sorted out. You could be reinstated in your job. So why don't you do it? It can't be that hard signing up for anger management, can it? And regardless about what you say, the old you would never have laid a hand on me. But I'm turning into your punching bag for you, so you can unleash your wrath upon me, and your outbursts, they're not normal, Chancer. You've already broken my nose once, so you do have huge issues with anger. And I do think you're in denial. You need to face the truth, Chancer. You need help. You need to acknowledge that you actually do have a problem. You need to own it. That's what they do at Alcoholics Anonymous and all those drug rehabilitation centres. They own it. They acknowledge it. They say, my name is Chancer. I've got a problem with anger.
I need to face the truth, do I? And get help, do I? Lovely. That's rich coming from you. You think I need help?
Says Chancer, throwing me violently against the wall, squeezing my shoulders so hard I'm wincing out in pain, as he stares blazingly in my eyes with a deranged, maddened look on his face that scares the bejesus out of me.
Please stop, Chancer. You're really hurting me. I feel like I don't know you anymore. You're not the man I married. You've morphed into a monster. You know what, Orlagh? I don't think you ever knew me, you bitch. I can see how disappointed you are in me, the way you look at me all the time, with such pity. You're pathetic, you know that. If I hit you, it's 'cause you're asking for it. You are the one that made me do it. You were the one that provoked me, not the other way round.
I watch in horror as Chancer pummels his fists into the aluminium walls of the trailer house. My heart sinks. I know if he was doing that to me, I would quite literally be dead, and no pun intended. I'm potentially living with a dangerous man. His anger is literally out of control. He's like an elephant in musk that wants to tear down everything he sees, as rational thought and consideration has seemingly been confiscated by excessive bursts of testosterone, adrenaline, and cortisol.
Please, Chancer, this is someone else's trailer house. You can't go damaging it like this. It isn't our property to ruin, and we won't be able to afford to pay for all the damages if you keep punching the walls like that. Ha! I know what this is all about, Orlagh. I'm not making big bucks that I made before. There's no nice little trips to Paris to buy little Hermes scarves or expensive designer handbags. I can see what's going on in your little pea-sized brain. Don't think I can't. You think that if I hadn't punched my boss, we wouldn't be in this mess, and your life would be lavishly cushioned with prosperity. Our nice apartment in New York, trips abroad. Don't think I don't know what's going on in your little head all the time, and how bitterly disappointed you are with me.
Look, Chancer, no one is judging you. I wish you'd get that. I really do. Everyone understands why you were so upset when your brother died, and anger is a natural reaction to grief. But your anger has got out of control. It's volatile. It's explosive. It's deadly. I'm scared of you, Chancer. I'm scared of you.
You know what I need, Orlagh, right now? I need to wring your neck like a chicken. and I'm very tempted to do so, so you better get out before it's too late. Get out of here now. I will not have a wife of mine lecturing me on what I should or should not do."
"All right, I'm going," I say, stomping out of the trailer, my eyes welling up with tears. I close the door behind me until it clicks shut gently in its slot. I hear Chancer kicking the furniture, muttering under his breath, "That bloody woman! That bloody woman! I could kill her!" Of course he's talking about me. My sneakers are now pressed on the pleasingly soft earthen ground, laced with ankle-high grasses and wild flowers. I glance towards the shimmering crystal-clear lake, that under the gossamer shadows of the sun is so beguiling. The diaphanous surface twinkling in the soft late afternoon light, reflecting the distant billowing curves of the mountains and the sumptuous vegetation of the trees and plants that cluster and cling to the sturdy foundations in curtains of viridescent splendour. I soak in the exquisite landscape like a ravenous hungry sponge that needs to absorb all the flavours of my beautiful environment, for I am starving and craving beauty, tranquillity and peace in my life, and it is all generously accessible to me out here in nature. It is within this exquisite beauty that I find my peace. It is the natural world that can dry my tears, extinguish my sorrows. It seemed so morally wrong to be in a place as fabulous as this, while being so incredibly miserable. The two don't go hand in hand. How can beauty complement the ugliness of what our relationship has become? The hateful words, the unkind accusations that we launch at each other like missiles from beyond enemy lines. It's almost like me and my husband are at war with each other, and every time we try to negotiate a peace deal, it almost always incites still more violence on his part. As is in the case in any war-torn situation, you begin to despise your enemy. It would seem that Chancer has become an enemy in my life, an enemy fighting on the other side. He's fighting for the right to humour his bloody-minded tenacity, refusing to dignify himself with even a remote touch of humility, common sense, and a broader perspective, while I'm fighting desperately to be heard by him, for him to open his eyes and see what is actually going on in our relationship, what he's doing to our marriage, to us. He's like the fox that entered the chicken coop and bit off the heads of all the chickens. I'd been so sure our relationship could be salvaged, that hope could be uncovered under the debris, that it could be cleaned up and restored, brought back to its original lustrous shine. But my hope is wearing thin. It's dangling precariously by a single fine silvery thread that could so easily snap at any given moment, so that the life force of our relationship will just depart like a soul leaving a body, and being no more. The flames of our love are burning out, the embers are barely visible. A faint smouldering flicker might just be seen, but not much is left, not any more. And when your hope is gone, then it's all over, as without hope, there's nothing. I relinquish all thoughts of Chancer from my mind, emptying my mind of all my troubles, as if thrusting all the garbage of ungraceful thoughts down the waste-paper disposal system in my kitchen. I'm determined to enjoy this beautiful walk, without tarnishing it with the soiled, demolishing debris of ugly words that have been used like bullets against me. In that moment I affirm to myself that I'm a warrior soul. I can overcome anything. I'm already feeling renewed, as my feet pad across the soft, earthen, spongy ground, towards the old-growth forest, made up of what is yellow birch and spruce trees. I'm guessing some of these spectacular trees are easily over 200 years old, for they have an aged look about them that suggests they've been around for a long time, long before I was even born. That's a very comforting feeling, you know. I ambled into the woods. My heart becomes as light as a feather, as if the heaviness consuming me has just flown away on a pair of wings. The forest is so mind-blowingly beautiful. I almost have to hold my breath. I'm in such awe. The tall, powerful trunks of the magnificent yellowwood trees dominate the landscape with a magisterial grace. They glide up into the sky with a steadfast deportment that is sturdy, reliable, solid, dependable. Yet there is a contemporary art engendered in every single tree trunk and every extended branch that rises to the canopy in pretty curls and sweeps, as none of these trees are stiff or uniformly straight, but are curvaceous and yielding, with ballerinic twists to their branches. I am drawn to the reliability of these trees, whose secured, knotty, steady roots are anchored into the rich, moist earth with a resolute determination, like noble warriors that will fight to the death to stand their ground. The stunning sculptural roots of the trees wrap themselves tenaciously around boulders like octopus tentacles, while some trees stand up on stilt-like roots. Many of them first grew from a little root ball, through a boulder or a mossy tree stump, that possibly rotted away a very long time ago. I bask in this gorgeous scent of this woodland sanctuary that embodies the uplifting fresh notes of wintergreen, which seems to open up all the nasal cavities so that I breathe it all in as I've never breathed before. It's a minty, sweet aroma that almost has a eucalyptics or Vicks-like quality to it. I'm enamoured by the dazzling confetti of yellow leaves that cascades above my head in showers of gold, while the long tree trunks are a silvery grey colour, with curling strips that blister the bark, like an exfoliating peeling paint. I observe a cloudless sky, encompassing the trees above my head, in a sea of cobalt blue. I catch fleeting glimpses of it, peeking at me through the branches. The forest is beautifully shaded, the ground richly moist, the lighting in the forest ethereal, the bird song enchanting, very musical and uplifting. I am greeted to a crescendo of pretty chirps and tweets. My feet eagerly amble over rocky appendages that jut angrily through the ground, occasional gnarled roots, fallen tree trunks covered in a plethora of green moss, lichen and birch bracket fungus that is so prolific in this golden jungle. I feel enervated, almost as if the strength of the trees has influenced my flagging spirits, as if my deflated body is standing up a little bit more confidently, even as I walk. I found myself happily whistling "Don't Worry, Be Happy," which seems to be exceedingly apt in the circumstances. I should take heed of the message buried within the words. The funny thing is the tune has suddenly just come into my head, almost as if by magic, and then curiously an extraordinary thing happens. Something is copying my tune precisely. Their whistle is definitely more fluid than mine. But when I stop whistling, so do they, at exactly the same time. How curious! I look around. Whoever is whistling has to be close by. But there's no one there. I know it's not Chancer. He can't whistle to save his life. But someone is in this forest, and they're whistling very happily along with me. For a moment I wonder if it could be a bird. I've certainly heard that birds can mimic whistling sounds, so I find myself craning my neck up into the tree branches, feeling absolutely certain I'll spot an unusual bird copying my whistle, but that is not what I see. My eyes at first are greeted to a big blob or mass of black that is hidden behind the branches of the tree. I find myself thinking, what the hell is that? I move towards the strange silhouette, not knowing what it could be that I'm encountering. Could it be a black leopard or a cougar? As far as I know, they hang around in trees, do they not? That would explain this huge thing that I appeared to be seeing. I had heard stories of black leopards seen in America before, but had never taken such bizarre accounts seriously. There is something incredibly big in the tree. I move closer, not engaging any fear or trepidation, but a mere inquisitive curiosity that needs satisfying, like an insatiable, annoying itch that you just have to scratch. I need to know what's in that tree. That's when I see a leaf branch being snapped off. It floats down from the tree, landing at my feet, followed by another and another. That is when I see the creature, very clearly, as the branches that this dark silhouette had literally concealed have now been snapped off the tree and are lying by my feet. I'm astonished by what I'm perceiving, that for a brief moment I think that my imagination has got to be playing tricks with me. I'm staring at a Bigfoot. Is that even possible? But there is no doubt about this in my mind. My mouth is hanging open so wide that I could probably catch flies if I really wanted to, while my eyes are possibly bursting out of their sockets exceedingly rudely. This was not what I was expecting to see, not at all, and I'm not sure quite how to react. Am I in danger? Is this imposing creature a threat to my life? I can't be sure about anything right now, but I'm certainly not compelled to run or scream. But I stand my ground, stoically and composed, like one of the yellow birch trees in the wood. I just stare and stare and stare and stare. If I did this on the underground in New York, I would almost certainly be challenged aggressively for being so obnoxiously rude.
"What's your problem, ma'am? Why are you staring at me all the time?"
They would probably scream at me. It's easy to cause offence on the subway, believe me, I know. The Bigfoot climbs down the tree, holding the branches with her hands, and swinging off them like a monkey. She moves with a stealth, an effortless fluidity and agility that is so gracefully impressive, until she jumps from the final branch, landing on her feet on the forest floor, like a cat from a kitchen counter. She stands only yards away from me. At first she seems smaller than I first envisaged, but then she unrolls her curled-up body like a scroll, standing up proud and tall before me. And I am mesmerised by her gargantuan size, quite daunted by it actually. But at the same time I feel pretty certain that she wants to be seen by me. If she didn't want to see me, she would have been a lot less conspicuous. I must be standing about 3 feet away from her. She is absolutely Herculean. I'd say she's at least 7.5 to 8 foot tall, exceedingly intimidating, maybe even more. Her shoulders are easily 4 foot across the very powerful chest area. She has a young, exuberant energy about her, but she's clearly a fully grown adult. She has small breasts, a body dense with muscle, and much like the yellow birch trees, she's made of solid, robust stuff. I notice her silky hair is actually a very dark brown colour, rather than black. But what perturbs me the most is her human-like appearance. Granted, her head rises to a pointed tip, and is low slung on her shoulders, with barely any impression of a neck, although there is one, but it's very stout and short. Yet her feminine face is actually rather pretty, almost delicate compared to the rest of her body, which is rather incongruous actually. But it's her eyes that bedazzle me the most. Her eyes are so beautifully kind. They're genuinely interested and fascinated in me. I possibly should feel fear. This Bigfoot has a warm, congenial, benevolent energy, and I can't help myself, but I like her at once. I really do. And I'm not quick to like people, but I do with her. As she looks at me, our eyes meet. I feel a connection with her at once. She's studying me judiciously, looking at me as if she's reading me like a book. I get the sense she knows everything about me, as if she can perceive my energy and even my heart. Almost as if she knows things about me that I might not even know about myself. There is nothing remotely primitive about her. I sense she has extrasensory abilities that as humans we are only beginning to tap into. The creature begins to whistle my song right back to me. Now there's no way she knew this song before. There's absolutely no way. How could she possibly have known it? I whistled it, but like she's downloaded the musical notes in her mind and can whistle them right back to me with such ease. We whistle the song together, our eyes remaining fixed on each other. Our joint whistling session seems to break the ice between us as we warm to each other much more, and I know that I could trust this Bigfoot with my life. I also know she genuinely likes me, like I like her. Right now I could seriously do with a friend, as that part of my life is running on dry. Unfortunately, I fell out with my parents over marrying Chancer, and have not spoken to them since that date. They never liked him. It was as if they sensed there was something off about him. My father turned around to me and literally begged me not to marry Chancer. Imagine your own father begging you not to marry someone. I was absolutely furious and affronted with him. "Sweetheart," he'd said to me, "your boyfriend reminds me of those glossy pin-ups in social media sites, full of promise, but underneath it all, there's just flimsy foundations filled with hot air." I decide to cast the touchy subject of my parents to one side and try another tune on the Bigfoot to see how she will respond to it. Will she memorize it? Will she remember it off by heart, as if it's been downloaded in her mind? I think of a tune. Then I whistle Jealous Guy, and to my amazement she copies the tune precisely. We whistle it together several times. I'm thinking to myself, how the heck do you do that? I hear the answer to that question in my head, as if the Bigfoot has spoken directly to me. I recalled the memory in my mind, so I don't forget it. Comes a female voice in my head that is definitely not my own. The female Bigfoot spoke to me in my head. She actually spoke to me, and I'm not going mad. Really, I'm not. I look at the Bigfoot and swear she's laughing at my dumbfounded bemusement. It seems the two of us, in such a short space of time, have formed an unlikely friendship. When I indicate that I need to be getting back to the trailer, although God only knows why I do, the Bigfoot accompanies me by my side, as if she's known me all my life, and is well acquainted with me. It's a surreal feeling. I watch how she walks, and it's like she glides, while she swings her arms backwards and forwards. I make my way gingerly back to the trailer. My heart begins to sink like the sun setting behind the horizon, as I dread the prospect of what I am soon to confront. Will I encounter an apologetic chancer, or will he be irate, as mad as when I last left him? I dread to think. I can feel a nervous energy brewing in my body, like a soft wind gaining wind speed. When we get to the edge of the yellow birch forest, the Bigfoot female stands still. She studies the trailer house where I'm staying. She draws in a deep breath. She scratches her head, furrows her brow, turns around and looks at me directly. I see worry in her treacle-coloured eyes, and I begin to wonder if she can actually read the energy of the trailer, like those psychic investigators do when they visit a haunted location and pick up the energy of the place. The only way I can describe her reaction to you is like a dog that suddenly becomes very alert to the sound of unwanted activity in the house and senses something bad is about to unfold. "Nice to meet you," I say to the creature, like I would to any other human being, as in truth I see her as much like myself, only covered with hair, infinitely stronger and bigger. She grabs my arms for a moment, and I hear in my head, "Be careful. The energy is dark, very dark." When I open the door of the trailer, the television is blaring loudly, and Chancer is watching a sports game on television. There's a crate of beer at his feet, along with many buckled cans lying strewn over the floor, while there's an empty pizza box lying across the coffee table. He looks up at me with eyes rolling at the back of his head. I can tell he's completely bladdered.
"So finally she returns. The lady of the manor. Too good for me, are you? Too good for me. Where have you been? Answer me. Where have you been? Why have you been gone for so long? I was waiting for you, but you never came back. Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you come back?"
My husband is so drunk, I don't humour him with an answer, as everything that comes out of his mouth is complete and utter nonsense. I speedily make my way to the kitchen to prepare myself a sandwich, which I take to my bedroom with a cup of tea. I'm sleeping in a separate bedroom from my husband because I don't feel safe sharing a bed with him. I lock the bedroom door behind me, pulling up an upholstered chair against the door for further protection. Then two things dawn on me so eloquently, as if I've had a moment of clarity when my mind has become as clear as Lake George. Number one, no one should live in this kind of fear from their own husband. And number two, what the hell am I doing living in the pocket of a man who has actually become my enemy? For a moment, I reflect over this, and then I smile to myself, as for so long I felt empty, defeated, isolated and alone. But today, I actually made a friend. The next morning I wake up to see the light of the early morning sun flickering through the open crack of the purple Velcro curtain in the poky, very bland, spare lilac-coloured room that I'm sleeping in. I rise up out of my hard, unyielding single bed, throw on a yellow sundress with a pretty matching cardigan, as the bright colour reflects my ebullient mood. How could I possibly be depressed after meeting that beautiful Bigfoot of whom I developed such a rapport? I hope to see her again. I glide a brush through the long sweeps of my dark brown hair, that is slightly tangled this morning, but I work it vigorously through the hair until it's smooth. I walk into the living area to discover my husband never made it to bed last night. Why does that not surprise me? He's lying passed out on the sofa, snoring loudly. The residue of a 4-day-old stubble prickles his chin. He looks as if he's been wearing the same clothes for several days. I'm struck by how unkempt he looks. Even some street vagrants look better than he does. I notice a sour, pungent scent in the room, along with a strong smell of alcohol, which I think is coming from Chancer. I quietly clear up the mess around my sleeping husband. Mindfully aware that this trailer home is not ours, we need to respect it and return it to the Montgomerys in tip-top condition. But I can see that that is never going to happen. My husband has already caused way too much damage, with thrashing the walls so hard there are holes everywhere. I gather all the excesses of my husband's drinking binge in a black bin liner, returning to the kitchen to prepare myself a much-needed cup of coffee. Moments later, the peace is disturbed by my husband's voice screaming out, "What the fuck? What the fuck?" He then comes charging into the kitchen like a belligerent rhino. He grabs me by the scruff of the collar. "What the heck have you done? You think this is funny?" He drags me across the floor. I see my husband's truck is standing about 3 feet away from the front door. It was parked about 100 feet away from the trailer, so it's clearly been moved. But the extraordinary thing is that my husband's truck is now completely lined with mosses that stretch over the bonnet, above the roof, towards the trunk, and this moss is made from big bricks, rather like when you're laying down turf, or if you're laying down bricks for an igloo. It looks just like that. But this is in fact my husband's truck we're talking about. There are 2 small trees planted in the soil above the roof of his car. One whose roots are covered with mossy earth. The other tree has been planted into the ground upside down, so that the dried-up roots are dangling in the air. In truth, it looks like some kind of weird, cryptic message, but I'm not quite sure what it's supposed to mean. "So this is what you got up to last night, is it? You bitch! You real bitch! Oh, I can't stand the sight of you! You make me sick! You surreptitiously parked my car here, covered my entire car with mossy earth, planted trees on top of the roof. What do you think you're doing? Have you lost leave of your senses? Are you stark raving mad? And you think you're funny?" It's in that moment a huge beam sweeps over my face, and I burst out laughing. I'm sorry, I can't help myself. I laugh so much that I'm literally doubled over. It's so funny to see my husband's truck thickly covered with mossy earth and 2 trees planted on top of it. I realise at once that the Bigfoot did this and actually moved my husband's car with her own bare hands, but she is very strong. My husband is so not amused. "You bloody bitch! You bloody bitch! What a cow you are! I don't know you any more. What on earth is going on in that head of yours? And I know what this is all about. Don't think I don't. You don't want me to go to town to buy more beers. Is that it? This is your cunning way of stopping me. As if you can possibly stop me from buying beers if I want them." I can see his face has grown crimson with rage. He slaps me violently hard across the cheeks. I wince in pain. "Clean this bloody mess up. I want my truck clean." I quickly set to work removing the dirt, dragging the small trees off the car, but seeing my husband's horrified face was hilarious, and I realised my Bigfoot friend has quite the sense of humour. Later that day I meet up with her in the woodgrove, and we walk together. I like her so much. She reveals to me that I'm like the tree that was planted in good soil, but my husband's roots have become rotten and dark. She sent him a cryptic message to tell him to get his life in check, to become more grounded in his life. A sagacious piece of advice he would do well to take on board, but I doubt my husband understood that message. It is later that night that my husband notices a very big shadowy face that appears to be staring at us through the window. I see the glimmer of golden yellow eyes, and I know at once it's my Bigfoot friend. But my husband has seen her. He's not impressed. "What the fuck?" he says. He immediately grabs a rifle. He storms out of the trailer. I can see the figure of my Bigfoot friend glancing over her shoulders as she quickly glides away from my husband, who is firing shots after her as he tries to chase after her. I really believe he's going to kill her. I can't possibly let this happen. He's got to stop. He's got to stop now. He's not going to kill my friend. There's no way. I immediately run up to my husband and I wrestle him for the rifle. "Stop it! Stop it!" I scream. I'm lashing out at him, hitting him hard with my hands and begging him to stop. Tears are streaming down my face. I'm well aware this is a stupid and dangerous thing to do, but I don't care. My husband drops the rifle, which falls precariously on the ground, and begins to attack me back. "It was a bloody Bigfoot, you stupid bitch! It was looking at us through the window. I was trying to kill the bloody thing for us, but you show no bloody gratitude, do you?
You can't kill her. She's my friend, I cry out. She's my friend. My husband throws me onto the ground, punches me in the nose, and I can feel the blood trailing down my face. He then begins to kick me with his boot over and over again. The pain is excruciating. He turns around to see the female Bigfoot standing there, looking at him with seething eyes, burning with fire. If looks could kill, she's wearing that look. She's holding his rifle in her hands, which she managed to retrieve from the ground. And before his very eyes, she snaps the rifle into pieces, and then runs towards me, gathering me into her hands and throwing me over her shoulders. My husband is wise enough not to run after her. The Bigfoot carries me a long way away, dropping me off on a roadside that has reasonable traffic. She speaks to my head. Find a safe place. Next time he'll kill you. I'll always be your friend. She then places me on the ground affectionately, pats my back, and I watch her glide away. I wave down a car, and would you believe it, a woman picks me up, whom is going to New York. And she is the very nurse who treated me in the hospital and gave me your card, and she insisted I was to come to the safe house. So that's why I'm here. Back to Enid. When Enid listens to Orlagh's story, she is completely amazed. She's heard some incredible stories in her life about the victims of abuse, but never a serendipitous story like this. Never. Enid is so enchanted by this story that she has completely forgotten about her aches and pains that have been bothering her for her entire life. In this moment in time, she is wrapped in a bubble of intrigue, and has never been more grateful for Bridget's annoying voice badgering her to open the front door, as she has a sneaking suspicion that there are no other people that will be privileged to hear such a phenomenal story, of which she does not doubt is the absolute truth. To cut a long story short, Orlagh moved into the Dove house and decided that she too wanted to start up a house for battered, abused women, having become one herself. Enid helped her become established in a secret location overlooking Lake George, where she was able to receive sponsorship from a charity interested in procuring a safe haven for victims of abuse. She's been helping women like herself as a vocation in life. To this very day, she has an ongoing friendship with her Bigfoot friend, while the relationship with her parents has thankfully been fully restored. After seeking a divorce from her husband Chancer, who was involved in a drink-driving accident, which may well have been a blessing in disguise, as it forced him to recuperate in hospital for a long while, after which he chose to attend anger management and finally returned back to work. Luckily, he's been able to rebuild his life all over again, and to this day he and Orlagh are on friendly terms. But that's all they'll be, friends. So there you are. That's my story.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my Omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.